Chapter 2659. Slave Seal. If it was said that every cave abode in the level 3 passageway was a small room, then the cave abodes in the level 4 passageway could only be considered as a large shop. This was a reflection of one's strength and rank. The demon dweller scouts who lived in the small rooms in the level 3 passageway were clearly of higher status and strength. The 4th level tunnels, on the other hand, could only live in a single room. Naturally, their status was lower and their strength weaker. The cave that Yi Xian entered was about 200 square meters in size. It was empty in the middle, and there was only a huge platform with teleportation runes on it. It should be used to hand in the spoils of war, as well as to receive rewards and daily consumables. Around the walls, there were some metal partitions that extended out from the walls. The space between every 2 partitions was a semi-open, independent small space. In addition to a bed, there was also a small table and a chair. There were a total of 40 or so of these semi-open rooms scattered along the walls of the cave abode, but they were all basically empty. Only the area furthest away from the entrance of the cave abode was occupied by 6 demon scouts. At this time, some of the 6 devil cultivators were lying on the bed. Some were sitting cross-legged on the bed with their eyes closed, and some were sitting on a small stool beside the bed, taking inventory of some items. Seeing Yi Xian enter, the 6 demons only raised their eyes to glance at him before ignoring him. They were still doing what they were supposed to do. Yi Xian had long since suppressed his power to 2nd level core, similar to these 6. Otherwise, the sudden appearance of an 8th level demon in the 4th level tunnels would have caused an uproar. It was clear that anyone who wanted to live in these bunks was free to do as they pleased. Most of the Demonkin scouts were out on missions or mining, and didn't spend much time on the Black Mosquito Bastion. Who would have the time or energy to remember where their bunks were? Yi Xian didn't bat an eyelid as he walked towards the inner area of the cave where the 6 fellows were. They didn't pay him any attention. After all, this was normal. If there was space inside, who would want to choose a place near the entrance? Although it was half open, as long as it was possible, anyone would subconsciously try to make their personal space as private and quiet as possible. Perhaps these 6 fellows were still dreaming that they would be able to enter the level 3 passageway and live in the level 3 cave abodes with small compartments after their strength increased. Unfortunately, they would never have that chance. Hum! A weak buzzing sound rang out. When Yi Xian was only a dozen meters away from the 6, he made his move without warning. As he activated the spirit source core in his head with all his might, a wave of majestic spirit energy suddenly gushed out from his body. It was like a rolling river, covering the sky and covering the earth. In an instant, it completely enveloped the 6 demon dweller scouts. This time, Yi Xian didn't even bother to include a few strands of the human cultivator's consciousness in his psychic power. They were just 6 weaklings. With his strength as a level 8 core ream, he could easily crush them with just the mental strength of the demonkin. In fact, it was indeed so. In the face of Yi Xian's psychic storm, the 6 demon scouts, who were only 1st or 2nd level core realm, were instantly obliterated. Blood flowed out of their 7 orifices, and they completely lost all signs of life. Seems like I used too much force. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian was speechless. He was a little worried that the psychic power would shatter the 6 demon scouts' heads. Fortunately, this worry was completely unnecessary. A minute later, 6 small black prismatic crystals appeared in Yi Xian's palm. They were taken from the 6 demon scouts' heads. As for the corpses, with his current strength, although he couldn't put a Starry Sky rank powerhouse into the undying world in his body, he didn't have any restrictions on corpses that had no signs of life. Yi Xian had already secretly experimented with this after killing the Black Tower Warden. If it wasn't for this, he might not have dared to make such a decision. He actually treated the 2nd floor of the Black Mosquito ship, the Demon Dweller's Cave, as his own hunting paradise. Ding! Discovered a psychic power core. Would you like to decompose it and extract its source? As Yi Xian put the 6 demon cores into his body, the notification from the devouring system sounded immediately. After giving a confirmation, Yi Xian turned and left the cave, beginning to search for the next batch of prey. Time passed slowly. 3 days had passed without him noticing. In these 3 days, Yi Xian rejoiced countless times that he finally decided to stay on the Black Mosquito ship and enter the second level of the Demonkin's cave to hunt. Compared to the time when he was searching for demon scouts outside, even the most fruitful time he'd ever been, he'd only killed 3 demon powerhouses. For Yi Xian, these 3 days were like a beggar who'd suddenly fallen into a bountiful gold mine. In these 3 days, the total number of demon cores he'd collected was a terrifying 947. On average, it was more than 300 cores a day. In other words, over 300 demon scouts had disappeared from the cave every day, dying at the hands of Yi Xian. Their brains were cut open, and Yi Xian tossed to the devouring system to extract their source of psychic power. As for their corpses, they were all thrown into his undying world, nearly 1,000 demon scouts. This was already 1/10 of the total number of demons guarding the Black Mosquito ship. Although there were many demons entering and exiting the second level of the cave every day, no one could find out who had died or left. However, with 1/10 of the demon scouts suddenly gone, if one paid attention, one could more or less see that something was amiss. Usually, there were around 2,000 demon dwellers in this area. Sometimes there would be more and sometimes less. But now, after Yi Zhuan's frenzied hunt, there were at most 1,000 demon scouts left here. More than 70% of the level 4 caves were empty, and they couldn't find a single demon after going through several level 4 tunnels. This situation caused even Yi Xian to faintly feel that something was wrong. If this continued, and some demons sensed that something was wrong, they'd report it to their superiors. When that happened, they'd be in real trouble. With all this in mind, Yi Xian decided to stop for now and wait a few days to see what would happen. At the very least, he'd have to wait for the demon population in this area to slowly recover a little. It was also at this moment that the notification of the devouring system sounded in his mind. Ding! All demon cores have been decomposed. Spiritual power source has begun to feed back. Progress 1. Progress 10. Chapter 2660. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations The Life and Death-Crushing Talisman Slave Imprint? When the devouring system's notification rang out in his mind, Yi Xian was stunned at first. Then, he suddenly felt a strong sense of joy in his heart. Other things aside, just the fact that the mind source core in his brain could be upgraded was enough to surprise him. Yi Xian had never thought about this before. Now that he had absorbed the vast and boundless source of mind power that had been extracted from the thousands of demon brain nuclei, his mind source core had unexpectedly upgraded. When the system's notification rang out, Yi Xian realized that the demon's mind source core actually had this kind of benefit. If that was the case, then in the future, if he were to kill even more powerful demon scouts, the grade of the demon cores he would obtain from their brains should also increase accordingly. This way, Yi Xian's cultivation speed in terms of the demon's mind power would not decrease continuously as his own level of mind power increased. Of course, the prerequisite was that he had enough demon brain nuclei to extract and decompose them. However, this wasn't something that Yi Xian planned to ponder over right now. His curiosity had been completely attracted by the new slave imprint ability that had appeared after the upgrade of his mind source core. The so-called slave imprint, as its name implied, was a kind of spiritual imprint used to achieve enslavement. At first, this had just been Yi Xian's subconscious understanding and strong subjective expectations. However, this understanding was quickly verified. Although Yi Xian's mind source core and the devouring system weren't one, the former had already taken root in Yi Xian's mind and was already inseparable from him. The same was true for the devouring system. In fact, its authority was obviously higher, so it was practically equivalent to the general manager of Yi Xian's entire body and spirit. Even the treasures that had been absorbed into Yi Xian's body could be used and manipulated by the devouring system at will. This mind source core, which had already fused with Yi Xian's body, flesh, and spirit, was no exception. In fact, every time he dissected a demon's brain, the large amount of mental power source extracted was automatically fed to the mental power source core in his sea of consciousness by the devouring system. On this point, Yi Xian had already issued a clear authorization to the system. It could be said that all the changes in the mind source core in his brain were monitored and controlled by the engulfing system. Because of this, Yi Xian was able to easily understand the specific information about the slave mark through the engulfing system. The so-called slave seal, simply put, was something similar to Tong Lao's life and death talisman. The only difference was that the former's life and death talisman was a thin layer of ice formed by absorbing the water vapor in the air. Yi Xian's newly obtained ability to condense a slave imprint was directly condensed from the mind source core in his brain. In the end, it was condensed into a spiritual imprint with his own unique aura. It was just like the talisman imprint he had obtained from the head core of the Warden Commander's Black Tower. That talisman imprint was the key used to activate the space gate, while Yi Xian's slave imprint was used to enslave demons. Once this kind of slave seal entered the devil cultivator's body, it would automatically sense the aura of the devil cultivator's brain, approach it, and finally fuse with it. After that, the devil cultivator would become Yi Xian's servant, because the spirit core in his brain would be assimilated by the aura of Yi Xian's slave seal. Moreover, it would be extremely loyal, and it was impossible for him to have a rebellious heart. In order to be freed, the demon would have to die, or Yi Xian would have to take back the slave imprint that had fused with the demon's mind source core. Based on this, Yi Xian's slave imprint was simply superior to Tong Lao's life and death talisman. They were on completely different levels. It's like a pillow falling from the sky when I'm sleeping. After understanding the specific effects of the slave imprint and the method to condense it, Yi Xian was so excited that he wanted to roar at the sky. However, when the words reached his mouth, they turned into a low-key murmur. I was worried that I wouldn't be able to continue hunting. I'm afraid that the next few days will be very uncomfortable. With this slave imprint, all the problems will be solved instantly. If I can't kill them for the time being, then I'll just directly enslave them. If I can plant a slave imprint on all the demon scouts here, then the entire second layer of the Black Mosquito ship will undoubtedly fall under my control, just like the first layer of the myriad hells below. The more Yi Xian spoke, the more excited he became. In the end, he stopped thinking about it and found a demon cultivator's cave that was located in a level 4 passageway. After strolling in, he immediately sat down cross-legged in a corner of the cave, dispelling the chaos in his mind. He focused his mind and activated the power of the spirit core in his sea of consciousness. According to the condensation method that he had long understood, he began to condense the first slave seal. After about 10 minutes, Yi Xian opened his eyes. His eyes were bright and filled with uncontrollable joy. The process of condensing the slave imprint was very smooth and could be said to be completed in one go. The reason why the first slave imprint took nearly 10 minutes was entirely because he was overly cautious. He had been very careful and only wanted to be safe, not caring about efficiency. According to the normal speed, with Yi Xian's current cultivation level in terms of mental power, it would take him about 6 minutes to condense a slave imprint. If he was more familiar with the process to a certain extent, the time could be shortened again. He should be able to succeed in 3 to 4 minutes. In that case, after Yi Xian was familiar with the process, if he did not sleep at all, Yi Xian could condense nearly 400 slave imprints a day. Normally, there would only be a little more than 2,000 demon scouts stationed in the second level of the Black Mosquito ship. In other words, Yi Xian only needed 5 days of continuous condensing to obtain enough spiritual slave imprints to enslave and control all the demon scouts in the second layer of the Black Mosquito ship. However, he obviously did not plan to start now. Since the first slave imprint had been successfully condensed, Yi Xian could not calm down if he did not immediately test its true effect. He was eager to try and was already impatient. After thinking about it for a while, he finally could not restrain himself and got up to leave the demon cave. He searched the surrounding level 4 passageways, and after a while, he finally saw the figures of 2 demon scouts in a cave. These 2 fellows' cultivation levels were still unbearable to look at. They were only at the second level of the Star Core realm. They were so weak that Yi Xian did not even have the interest to hide it. As soon as he stepped into the cave, he immediately activated the spirit source core in his mind. Wang! Whoosh! In the next moment, a powerful spiritual storm surged out, mixed with a small, blackish-purple spiritual imprint that was as small as a hair. Bang! Chapter 2661. Demon Beast Black Mosquito Poof! The saber light flashed, and the head of the demon cultivator on the ground was split into two without any suspense. In the mix of red and white things, a small black prismatic crystal was impressively revealed. Then Yi Xian raised his hand and it fell into his palm. Even the little bit of blood on its surface was silently removed as the black crystal floated to Yi Xian's palm. With a flip of his hand, the black demon's brain disappeared in Yi Xian's palm and was sent into his body to be decomposed by the devouring system to extract the source of its spiritual power. Almost at the same time, Yi Xian casually waved his hand, and the corpse of the demon cultivator scout that had its head cut open strangely disappeared and was absorbed into the undying world within his body. Not even a drop of blood was left on the ground. All of this took a long time to describe, but in reality, the entire process only took 3 to 4 seconds. By now, Yi Xian had killed more than 1,000 demon scouts in the second layer of the Black Mosquito ship. He was already familiar with all the steps. After doing all this, Yi Xian turned his head and swept his gaze to the left. Tu Zhang to the left, a demon dweller scout could be seen. He stood respectfully with his hands clasped behind his back. His head was lowered at a 30-degree angle. His entire person exuded a sense of respect and modesty. This demon scout was the demon slave that Yi Xian had planted the first slave seal to control. Yi Xian coldly glanced at the demon and immediately reminded him, "If there are other demons present in the future, you don't have to be so respectful. Don't expose the relationship between you and me. Do you understand?" "My lord, Barker understands." The demon scout nodded, but his eyes were lowered. He didn't even dare to look straight at Yi Xian. His tone was calm, but there was an unquestionable sense of obedience in his voice. "That's good. You're called Barker, right? I have to say that you're quite lucky. As my first demon slave, when I control the entire Black Mosquito ship in the future, you'll be under one and above all." Seeing that the demon's mind wasn't affected by the slave seal in his spiritual power source core, Yi Xian secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He looked at the demon up and down and threw him a sweet date. Then, he continued, "Now, tell me everything you know about the Black Mosquito ship." "Thank you, my lord." Barker's face didn't show any surprise. He appeared to be indifferent. He immediately bowed his head slightly again and thanked him respectfully. It wasn't that his temperament was mature and steady, but because of the slave seal's influence, he was now loyal to Yi Xian. Under these circumstances, whether he was a general manager or a small warden, it made no difference to him. Immediately, Barker followed Yi Xian's instructions and told Yi Xian everything he knew about the Black Mosquito Star Fortress. He told Yi Xian everything he knew, no matter how big or small. Although most of the information was obtained by Yi Xian from the demon wardens in the Cataclysm, there was still some information that Yi Xian didn't know or couldn't be sure of. For example, although Yi Xian guessed that the 3 portals in the central square of the second floor of the Black Mosquito ship were connected to different areas, he couldn't be sure of the authority to use the other 2 portals. When he'd killed the 1,000 demon scouts earlier, he'd acted quickly and finished everything in the shortest amount of time. He hadn't had the time to ask about these things. Now that Barker had finished speaking, Yi Xian was reassured. The 3 spatial gates did indeed have different activation methods. Yi Xian already had authority over the one that led to the lower level of the Myriad Abyss. As for the spatial gate in the middle that led to the 3rd level, none of the devil cultivators in the 2nd level actually had the authority to activate it. To have this kind of authority, one had to be at least a demon expert on the 3rd floor or above. Basically, those fellows on the 3rd floor and above could come down at any time. However, it was completely impossible for the demons on the 2nd floor to go up to the 3rd floor through the spatial door, unless someone came from above to take you with them. In this Black Mosquito Bastion, the 1st floor of the Cataclysm and the 2nd floor of the Black Mosquito Bastion were like commoner areas. The 1st floor was used to hold captives, and the 2nd floor housed large numbers of low-level demons like coolies and salesmen. Relatively speaking, the 3rd and 4th levels were the upper echelons of the bastion. Only the best of the best were allowed to enter. They were the most trusted of the bastion's leader, Naboshin. There were only a few hundred of them on the first 2 floors. These few hundred elites of the Black Mosquito Bastion would not normally go to the 1st and 2nd floors. Because the 3rd floor was the engine room and storage area, The demons there all had their own duties and responsibilities, and had to stick to their posts. There were even fewer demon elites on the 4th floor. They were either the right-hand men of the leader, Naboshin, or some demon think tanks that he had recruited. They had no contact with the ordinary demons on the lower 2 floors, and they would not take the initiative to come to this slum for no reason. Only one person was an exception. This person was called Mosquito Butcher. It was said that he had an unspeakable special relationship with the Black Mosquito, the guardian beast of the Black Mosquito Bastion. He held the position of supervisor under Naboshin. In addition, this Mosquito Butcher was arrogant and loved to show off. Because of his unclear relationship with the Black Mosquito, he was despised by the other demons on the first 2 floors. Because of this guy could only go to the commoner areas below to show off his power. Usually, he would come once or twice a month. Calculating the time, if nothing unexpected happened, he should come in the next 3 to 5 days at most. As for this Mosquito Butcher's cultivation, it was neither high nor low, only 4th level satellite realm. 4th level satellite realm? Hearing this, Yi Xian's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately frowned. Right now, he was only in the 8th level of the core state. After the core state was the meteor state, and after the meteor state was the satellite state. In other words, the Mosquito Butcher, who was disliked on the first 2 floors, was almost 2 levels higher than Yi Xian. Under such circumstances, if the Mosquito Butcher really came to the 2nd floor in the next 3 to 5 days, it would undoubtedly be a huge crisis for Yi Xian. After all, there were so few demon scouts on the 2nd floor, and this person was fond of showing off, so he would naturally wander around showing off. How could he not see the abnormality? Chapter 2662. Yi Xian's plan. The Black Mosquito is this bastion's guardian beast. The Black Mosquito is named after it. The other 9 bastions are the same. They all have their own guardian beasts, and they're named after them. Barker bowed to Yi Xian again, then continued to explain patiently. The ancestral land of the demonkin is at the edge of the first universe. There is a star field that is rich in magical beasts. Some of the demonic energy emitted by the magical beasts is beneficial to our psychic powers. It can increase the rate at which our psychic powers grow. That's why there is a magical beast in every bastion. The black fog that pervades the interior of the Black Mosquito is emitted by the Black Mosquito. We demonkin cultivate and live in this black fog for a long time. It's very beneficial to our psychic powers. In addition, the Black Mosquito isn't only useful for the black fog. It's also very strong. Like the leader of the Black Mosquito Bastion, Naboshin, it's in the black hole realm. It's even stronger than Naboshin. At the very least, Naboshin doesn't dare to provoke it. However, the Black Mosquito was subdued after it was captured. The leader of our ancestral land used psychic powers to control it and branded it with a psychic imprint. There are 2 of these imprints, one mother and one son. The son seal is sealed in the Black Mosquito's body, while the mother seal is in the hands of Naboshin, the leader of the Black Mosquito Bastion. However, he can't just use the mother seal to control the Black Mosquito because it will consume a lot of his psychic powers. There's also the possibility that the Black Mosquito will devour him. Only when the bastion is in a special emergency will it be used to defend against the enemy. At this point, Barker retreated to the side and didn't continue speaking. It was clear that this was all he knew about the Black Mosquito magic beast. However, as far as Yi Xian was concerned, the information he'd said was more than enough. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian seemed to remember something. He asked, "That's right. Where's the Black Mosquito? Is it imprisoned, or can it move freely?" No one dares to imprison a guardian beast. Barker was aware of this, so he explained, "The Black Mosquito magical beast lives in the beast nest. The beast nest is located on the 3rd level above, and it occupies a space all by itself. There is a special space door in the central square of the 3rd level, but other than the Black Mosquito magical beast, there are only 2 people who have the authority to enter. One is the small leader Naibuishan, and the other is Mosquito Butcher. The Black Mosquito demonic beast basically doesn't come out of the beast nest space, but the Mosquito Butcher will go in once in a while to serve it." "Serve?" Hearing this strange word, Yi Xian frowned. At the very least, demons looked like humans from the outside. He found it a little inconceivable that a human would actually serve a magical beast. Yes, to serve. The expression on Barker's face was a little strange, but he still explained in detail. The reason why the mosquito butcher is despised by the upper circle of demons in the 2 levels above is because of this. The black mosquito demonic beast is born with a sexual nature. It has to do that kind of thing every once in a while, but ordinary demons can't satisfy it. Before the mosquito butcher, one would die almost every year. Then, Naibuishan would choose a suitable replacement from the demons in the 2nd level. Only the mosquito butcher was chosen from the 2nd level 3 years ago. I didn't expect him to be a 3rd-year realm demon beast. Obviously, the black mosquito demonic beast is very satisfied with him. It is also because of this reason that Naibuishan will accommodate him to a certain extent and let him be arrogant and despotic. So that's how it is. Yixin immediately came to a realization. With the mosquito butcher, Mount Naibua would be able to avoid losing a demon cultivator subordinate every year. In this kind of situation, it wasn't unacceptable to let this fellow go. It was just that the mosquito butcher was actually willing to do such a disgusting thing and seemed to be enjoying it. This character and temperament were really filthy. No wonder he was despised and rejected by the upper 2 levels of this space fortress. Okay, you will guard the central square for the next few days. Once the mosquito butcher arrives, inform me immediately. Yixin waved his hand and gave Barker an order. The other party quickly left. Yixin's slave mark had been left in the magic core in his brain. Within a certain distance, the master and servant could use spiritual power to communicate with each other. Therefore, Yixin was not afraid that this guy would not be able to find him and pass on the information. After Barker left, Yixin immediately fell into deep thought. The mosquito butcher's arrival was definitely a huge crisis for him. Previously, Yixin just wanted to see if he could hide and lie low until the wind blew over. However, it was different now. He vaguely felt that the black mosquito beast was of great use to him. Since that was the case, he had to get the key mark in the mosquito butcher's hand that could allow him to enter the demon nest. In other words, even if the mosquito butcher did not come looking for him, he would have to take the initiative to provoke him. However, the other party was a satellite state expert, which was 2 realms higher than Yixin. With his current strength, even if he launched a sneak attack, he would not be able to kill the other party. As for the key mark in the mosquito butcher's magic core, he did not even need to think about it. However, besides killing the mosquito butcher, Yixin now had another option, which was to use the slave mark to subdue the mosquito butcher, just like how he had enslaved Barker. Of course, this method was also dangerous. After all, Barker was only a 2nd-order core state expert, while the mosquito butcher was a satellite state expert. The same slave mark would definitely have different effects on the 2 of them. Even if he succeeded in using the slave mark on the other party's body, there was still a possibility of failure. No matter what, I have to give it a try. However, in order to be safe, it would be best to take advantage of the chaos and launch a sneak attack. After muttering to himself for a while, Yixin finally made up his mind. As he muttered to himself, he immediately closed his eyes and started to condense a large number of slave marks in a frenzy. After almost a day, Yixin opened his eyes. After a day of continuous condensing, there were now a total of 100 slave marks in the mind source core in his brain. Among them, 99 were ordinary slave marks, just like the one in Barker's brain. The last one had been specially strengthened by Yixin. Just condensing this strengthened version of the slave mark had taken him a full 2 hours. He intended to use this strengthened version of the slave mark to deal with the mosquito butcher. However, before that, there was one more thing that he had to do. Chapter 2663. Arrival of the mosquito slayer. This time, Yixin didn't search for his target in the level 4 cave dwellings in the level 4 passageway. Instead, he came to the level 3 passageway. Of course, in order to not attract too much attention, he adjusted his cultivation base to level 4 core star realm. In the level 3 cave dwellings in the level 3 passageway, there were basically demon scouts of level 4 core star realm and above. There were even level 6 demon scouts. Although the strength of the demon scouts in the level 1 passageway had increased compared to the previous level 4 cave dwellings, and the increase wasn't small either. It was at least 2 levels higher. However, to Yi Xian, this wasn't a problem at all. In the beginning, he only searched for demon scouts who were alone or in groups of 2 or 3. Later on, with the protection of other demon slaves and sentries around him, Yi Xian's courage gradually grew. Later on, even if there were 7 or 8 demon scouts together, he still didn't hesitate to attack. 99 slave seals had all been successfully planted. As for Yi Xian's demonic slaves, they had gone from Barker alone to 100. The entire process only took half a day. Such a huge harvest and efficiency made Yi Xian very excited. At the same time, he had a deeper understanding of the perverse ability of the slave seal. Under such circumstances, he was naturally more confident that he could use the same method to enslave the mosquito slayer. He even felt that if he had the opportunity to implant the slave seal into the body of the demon's leader, Neboshin, he might be able to directly enslave and subdue that guy. However, this was just a thought in his heart. Even if the slave seal he condensed now had the ability to do so, Yi Xian wouldn't make a move before he was sure. After all, if there was a failure, the consequences would be severe. It was simply unbearable. After all, the current situation was simply extremely good to him, and under such circumstances, there was utterly no need to rush forward rashly. After subduing the 99 demon slaves, Yi Xian immediately ordered them to head to the central plaza of the second level where Barker was and spread out in groups of 2s and 3s. Of course, they could also hide in the main passageways around the plaza. After all, there were usually not many demon dwellers in the plaza. If 100 demon dwellers suddenly appeared there, the mosquito butcher would be suspicious and it would backfire. Apart from that, Yi Xian also passed down the detailed plan to deal with the mosquito butcher. Basically, when the mosquito butcher arrived, the nearby demonic slaves would have to think of a way to create conflict and then escalate the situation. This would give the surrounding demonic slaves a legitimate reason to approach. In the end, everyone would be enraged and attack together, dragging the situation into a state of chaos as much as possible. Although the number of demonic slaves had now reached a full 100, Yi Xian only needed to communicate with them using his mental power when transmitting these orders. It was similar to mass messaging, so it was not very strenuous or time-consuming. Otherwise, if the number of demonic slaves increased in the future and they did not gather together, just transmitting orders would cause Yi Xian a lot of trouble. After giving out all the instructions, the 99 newly subdued demonic slaves left one after another. Yi Xian randomly found a demon dweller's cave residence in one of the third-level passageways. After entering, he chose a single room and began to condense the slave seals. Time passed slowly. Unknowingly, another 2 days had passed. In these 2 days, Yi Xian had condensed more than 300 slave seals. The efficiency had already surpassed the previous time when he condensed a large number of them. This was naturally because he was gradually becoming more familiar with the process. Among these 300 slave seals, Yi Xian had specially condensed 2 strengthened versions. In other words, he now had a total of 3 strengthened versions of the slave seals in his hands. One of them was prepared to be used directly on the mosquito butcher after he arrived. As for the other 2, Yi Xian had only prepared them in advance. These 2 slave seals would be strengthened a 3rd or even a 4th time after he successfully subdued the mosquito butcher. In short, the more strengthened, the better. This was because Yi Xian planned to use them to deal with the demon dweller's leader, Neboshin. The other party was a supreme existence in the black hole realm, so Yi Xian had to give it his all. In front of an official opponent, the slave seals used to deal with him would never be the best, only better. At this moment, he had only condensed for 2 days before opening his eyes and temporarily ending this time's full power condensation. This was because Yi Xian had just received a simple signal from Barker's mental power right before he opened his eyes. In other words, the mosquito butcher had finally arrived. Yi Xian's eyes flashed. He took a deep breath and adjusted his aura. After confirming that there was no obvious murderous intent leaking out, he got up and left the cave dwelling. He quickly rushed to the central square of the second level. At the same time, in the central square of the second level of the Demon Dweller's cave dwelling area, in the middle of the 3 spatial portals standing in the middle of the square, the pillar and beam suddenly glowed, and then converged into a layer of black light film inside the spatial portal. Seeing this, Barker immediately sent a signal. Although he had not seen the person, he knew that it was the mosquito butcher who had arrived. On one hand, it was because the time was close. This guy would usually arrive in 1 or 2 days. On the other hand, it was because except for him, the elites of the demon dwellers on the upper 2 levels would not come here. At this moment, there were about 20 to 30 demon dwellers scattered in the huge central square. Some were walking toward the first-level main passageways, and some were walking in the opposite direction. They were walking toward the central area of the square where the 3 space portals were located. All of this was normal, so when Mosquito Butcher stepped out of the space door, he glanced around proudly and didn't find anything unusual. This person was quite tall and thin. He looked about 30 years old. He had a mustache and triangular eyes. There was a strong, wretched aura all over his body. As he stepped forward, the black light film in the space portal behind him had disappeared in a flash in just a short breath. As for Mosquito Butcher, after looking around, he put his hands behind his back and walked unsteadily toward the entrance of the level 1 main tunnel in front of him. His only purpose for coming to the slums on the 2nd floor was to show off and show off. After all, serving the black mosquito beast was not a very comfortable thing. He had to find a way to vent the pressure and depression that had accumulated in his heart, or at least to resolve it. Chapter 2664. Enough ants could kill an elephant in the 2nd layer of the demon dweller's slums. There had never been a demon dweller scout who dared to be disrespectful to him. Basically, after seeing him from afar, whether they were willing or not, they would take the initiative to greet him with a smile. To Mosquito Butcher, this was a kind of enjoyment, and this kind of enjoyment could slowly dissolve the pressure and depression that had accumulated in his heart, causing it to dissipate and dissipate. It had to be said that this guy's survival instinct was actually very strong. He was doing such a disgusting thing, but he still lived well. He could even think of a way to relieve pressure and adjust his state of mind and state. He was indeed a genius. But from another point of view, this person was too sad. In order to survive, he had already lost everything else. Stop! You 2 damn lowly commoners. I'm talking about you. As such a situation had never happened before, Mosquito Butcher was immediately stunned. By the time he regained his senses, the 2 demons had already passed by him and were walking behind him. There was even a faint snicker coming from behind him. Mosquito Butcher immediately flew into a rage and turned around to scold them. It was this scolding that made the 2 demon dwellers stop in their tracks. The other demon dwellers around the square were also alarmed by this scolding, and they all turned to look at Mosquito Butcher. Under such circumstances, he had to show off his prestige even more. Otherwise, once this matter spread out, he was afraid that all the devil dwellers in the 2nd layer of the slums would follow suit in the future. Gradually, all the devil dwellers would no longer listen to him. If that really happened, not only would the accumulated pressure and resentment in his heart not be able to be dispelled, it would even make things worse because of this matter. For Mosquito Butcher, at that time, he would not be far from death or a complete mental breakdown. Therefore, in his eyes, this matter was not a small matter that could be casually brushed aside. This was a matter of life and death, so he had to take it seriously. As these thoughts flashed through his mind, the Mosquito Butcher's triangular eyes instantly burst out with a fierce light. Since these 2 lowly people in front of him did not know how to appreciate his kindness, then it was just right to use them as an example to fiercely establish his authority in this 2nd floor of the demon slum area. You're the ones who asked for it. No wonder you, Lord Mosquito Butcher, are so vicious. With a cold glint in his eyes, Mosquito Butcher gritted his teeth and said this. Then his figure flashed and he raised his hand to smash the 2 demon slaves in front of him. The gap between their realms was too great. With a gap of more than 2 major realms, this was a complete suppression. Kacha! Kacha! 2 crisp sounds of bones cracking could be heard. The 2 demon slaves didn't even have the chance to react before their chests completely caved in. Blood spurted out of their mouths as their bodies flew backwards like a kite with its string cut. Before he could even land, he had already died. This scene caused a large number of exclamations and gasps of cold air to erupt from the surroundings. The Mosquito Butcher was very satisfied with all this. It was good that they knew to be afraid. If they knew to be afraid, they would be more respectful in the future. That would make me feel even better. With this thought in mind, when he retreated after one strike and once again put his hands behind his back, he turned his head proudly to look at the other demons around him. The smile on his face suddenly froze again. In his line of sight, the expressions on the faces of the 20 or 30 demon slaves around him seemed to be a little out of his expectations. Although they were also shocked, there was no fear. Instead, they were all angry, extremely angry, giving people a feeling that they were about to explode. The mosquito butcher was stunned, and then a light flashed in his mind. He suddenly understood what was going on. Compared to him, could it be that the demon slaves on the second floor didn't feel the pressure? Didn't they have accumulated resentment in their hearts? As the lowest level of the Black Mosquito Bastion, they excavated mineral resources day and night outside, even risking their lives. Only once they completed a certain amount of tasks could they return once, holed up in the slums of the second floor for a few days to adjust and recuperate. But when the time was up, they immediately had to leave again. This cycle repeated year after year. The mosquito butcher could at least vent his presence in front of this group of demon slaves to resolve the accumulated resentment and pressure in his heart. But what about them? Not only did they have no way to vent, but they also had to brew more resentment because of the mosquito butcher's bullying. In this way, if he really wanted to compare, these guys were clearly worse than him. And now, because of what had just happened, the demons around him were obviously all enraged. The resentment and pressure that had been accumulating in their hearts for a long time were on the verge of exploding. These guys were going crazy. Thinking of this, the mosquito butcher's face changed in an instant. He was powerful, and the demons around him were just ants in his eyes. But with his status, killing 2 or 3 of them was not a big deal. If he killed too many, more than 10, Mount Naibwa would definitely not let him go. Since he couldn't kill them and these guys were crazy, wouldn't that mean he could only be beaten up? These guys were weak. But the key was that there were so many of them. Once they went crazy, each of them could swallow him alive in one bite. You, don't mess around. I'm telling you, I'll go crazy. Seeing that the demons around him were all gathering here with ferocious expressions, and even some demons were rushing over from the 4 entrances of the first-level main passageways around the square, the mosquito butcher was completely scared. He stuttered a warning and wanted to retreat from the path he came from. He was clearly planning to escape through the space door. Kill him. Kill this bastard. I've had enough. I'm going to fight it out with him. After realizing the mosquito butcher's intention, the dozen demon slaves closest to him immediately roared and rushed over without fear of death, directly cutting off the mosquito butcher's path of retreat. This scene was like a fuse that was lit, and in an instant, the other demon slaves further away in the square also erupted. All the figures that could be seen were running wildly, murderous, and converging. By the time Yixin arrived, the scene was already in complete chaos. About 7 or 8 demon slaves' corpses were lying on the ground, and the mosquito butcher was still besieged by a large number of agitated demons. There were more than 100 of them, and they had already surpassed the number of Yi Xian's demon slaves. Obviously, some of the demon slave scouts that had not been subdued by him were affected and took the initiative to join in because of their emotions. This scene surprised even Yi Xian. The expression on his face gradually became strange, and he suddenly had a feeling of not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Don't come over, you bunch of lunatics. Don't come over. Chapter 2665. Demon Bloodstar Essence Sword Tonic. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The sound of something tearing through the air could be heard. At least 100 invisible blades formed by the Demon Slayer's mental strength shot towards the Mosquito Slayer from different directions. These invisible blades formed by mental strength were only the attacks of low-level Demon Slayer. To the Mosquito Slayer, who had reached the 3rd major realm, the Satellite Realm, he did not care at all. With the strength of his body, even if he was hit, it would only hurt a little. Therefore, in the face of these invisible blades, the Mosquito Slayer did not care at all. He had already planned to take them head-on. The key was that the few Demon Slayers who had rushed to the front and sides of him were all grimacing. Their cold teeth made him feel extremely disgusted. In order to prevent these lunatics from biting him, the Mosquito Slayer's attention was all on them. Sometimes he dodged, sometimes he retracted his strength, raised his hand and sent one flying, During this process, he would occasionally feel a slight pain on his body. The pain was caused by the invisible blades that shot towards him. In the blink of an eye, more than half of the invisible wind blades had landed on his body. At this moment, Yi Xian, who was mixed in with the demon slayers, suddenly felt his heart skip a beat. This was because the invisible wind blade that he shot out with the slave seal was already in front of the mosquito slayer and would hit his body soon. However, it was also very likely that the other party would dodge it. The difference between the gains and losses was too great, and he could not remain calm. Whoosh! Fortunately, the mosquito slayer ignored it in the end and treated this invisible wind blade as the same as the previous ones. As the faint sound of something tearing through the air disappeared, the invisible wind blade hit the side of the mosquito slayer's neck and the slave seal wrapped within it and instantly drilled in. Ouch! As a sharp pain suddenly came from his neck, the mosquito slayer, who was busy dodging the bites of the demon slayers, reflexively let out a soft cry and raised his hand to touch the side of his neck. Previously, the invisible wind blades could not even break through the skin of his body. After being hit, it would not even turn red. However, at this moment, he clearly felt as if something had drilled through his exposed neck. This was definitely not normal. As Mosquito Butcher raised his hand to stroke the side of his neck, a hint of vigilance appeared in his eyes. Unfortunately, this vigilance was quickly replaced by an increasingly intense feeling of bewilderment and sluggishness. It was obvious that the slave imprint had rapidly invaded the mind source core in his brain and was currently enslaving it. At this moment, the Mosquito Butcher's hands stopped moving. He allowed the demons to bite him without any reaction. He just stood there in a daze like a robot that suddenly ran out of battery. "All right, stop." Yi Xian was completely relieved. He stopped and shouted coldly. Following his shout, nearly 80% of the demon soldiers that were madly attacking the mosquito slayers suddenly stopped at the same time. The frenzy from before disappeared in the blink of an eye, and they became cold and indifferent. This scene was far too strange. Even the other 20% of the devil people, who were in a berserk state at this moment, were greatly shocked by this strange scene. Their hearts shook violently, and their originally berserk state of mind actually regained its clarity. Almost subconsciously, these 20 or so demons looked at Yi Xian at the same time. Their faces were filled with shock, and their eyes were filled with suspicion. Then, they all started to shout at Yi Xian. "You? Something's wrong. Something's wrong. This seems to be a trap. Who exactly are you? Alright, you guys go to the first level main passageways around the plaza and wait. Don't let the other demons come over. I need some time here." Yi Xian did not pay attention to the demons that were shouting at him. Instead, he calmly gave another order. In an instant, more than 90 demon slaves were divided into 5 groups. 4 groups rushed to the first-level main passageways around the central plaza, while the other group rushed to the 3 spatial doors in the center of the plaza. After all, from time to time, there would be some demons that would suddenly enter through the spatial door from the outside. Originally, it had nothing to do with you guys. Since you have nothing better to do than to join in the fun, then I'll just take you guys in advance. Just as all the demon slaves were about to leave, Yi Xian's gaze swept across the 20 or so demons that had shouted at him. As he spoke, he raised his hand and a series of slave seals shot out. Swish! Swish! The faint sound of something tearing through the air continued to ring out. Before these fellows could react, they had all struck their bodies and entered them. Compared to the Mosquito Butcher, who had a strong cultivation base of the satellite realm, this group of fellows clearly reacted faster. They immediately fell into a daze and stood there motionless. "Greetings, my lord." It was also at this moment that Mosquito Butcher, who was more than 10 meters to the right, suddenly spoke respectfully. He humbly bowed towards Yi Xian. It was unknown if it was because he was controlled by the slave seal, but this fellow didn't even have the dense, wretched aura from before. He revealed an unprecedented calmness. That's strange. When you're not being wretched, you're even more annoying. I simply want to slap your face. Looking at the serious Mosquito Butcher, Yi Xian frowned, then continued. Forget it, you should be as wretched as before. Otherwise, It's hard to be sure that I won't suddenly act impulsively and directly slap you to death on the spot. With that, Yi Xian waved his hand and took out the Devil Bloodstar Essence sword. It turned into a blood-red light and shot towards the 7 or 8 corpses of the demon cultivator scouts not far away. Eft, eft, oh! Several muffled sounds rang out, and the heads of the 7 or 8 demon cultivator scouts were instantly cut open, revealing the red and white objects and a small black monster core inside. What was even stranger was that as their heads were cut open, the corpses of the 7 or 8 demon cultivator scouts withered at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the blink of an eye, they turned into withered corpses. On the other hand, after doing all of this, it turned into a ray of light and circled around before shooting back. In the blink of an eye, the demonic Bloodstar Essence sword that entered Yi Xian's body was a little brighter than when it was shot out earlier. It was as if the essence of the flesh and blood in the corpses of the demon cultivator scouts had all been absorbed by it in an instant, turning into flesh and blood that aided the growth of the Blood Demon Star Essence sword. Towards all of this, Yi Xian was not surprised, because he had already tried it before and had already discovered it. It was also because of this that when he killed the demon cultivator and obtained the brain cores, he almost always used this Devil Bloodstar Essence sword. Since the demon cultivator's flesh and blood could be used as its food, then it obviously could not be wasted. Chapter 2666. A false alarm. Yi Xian was indeed disgusted by people like Mosquito Butcher. He always had the urge to kill him. If not for the fact that he was not confident that he could kill this guy, Yi Xian would not have planted a slave imprint on him. This kind of trash did not even have the qualifications to be his slave. But now, out of helplessness, he had already taken him in as a slave. Although Yi Xian was unwilling, he could only reluctantly accept this fact. Of course, he could also kill Mosquito Butcher now, but that would obviously do more harm than good. After all, even if he could obtain the key imprint to activate the spatial door in the middle from the demon core in Mosquito Butcher's brain, as well as the key imprint to enter the 3rd level of the demon nest. However, if Yi Xian didn't have the Mosquito Butcher by his side and entered the 3rd floor by himself, it was extremely likely that something unexpected would happen. After all, in the 3rd and 4th levels above, all the demon dwellers added together numbered no more than 1,000. With such a small population density, most of the demon dwellers in the same area would know each other. Under such circumstances, it was almost impossible for Yi Xian not to arouse suspicion when an unfamiliar face suddenly appeared. So, after some consideration, Yi Xian decided to temporarily let this guy live for a while. When he was no longer useful in the future, he would kill him. Alright, let's talk about the Black Mosquito Demon Beast. Suppressing the disgust in his heart, Yi Xian coldly glanced at Mosquito Butcher, who had recovered his wretched aura, but at least seemed to be quite obedient. Yes, my lord. Seeing that Yi Xian had finally turned his attention to him, Mosquito Butcher grinned wretchedly. He immediately ran over with his arms around his neck and bent his waist. He stood about 10 feet away from Yi Xian and then stood respectfully with both hands. Suddenly, an expression of grief and indignation appeared on his face. It was so fast that it was as if he was changing his face. Even his words revealed an extremely obvious whimper. My lord, I'm so pitiful. Not only is that female mosquito extremely smelly, she's also very interested in that matter. She's extremely passionate and is simply addicted to it. What's more, it likes to be on top. Instead, I'm like a woman. It's so sad. The most important thing is that the beast is sick. It likes to stab me with its sharp mouth part while doing it. The more I screamed, the happier it laughed. I was tortured to death every time. Basically, when I came out of the devil's nest, my throat was hoarse. Woo! I don't want to live anymore. Ooh! As he spoke, he actually began to cry, wiping his tears pitifully. All of this happened too quickly in less than a minute. But in this short period of time, Yi Xian was completely stunned. At this moment, his mouth was slightly open, and his eyes were fixed on Mosquito Butcher, who was wiping his tears. His entire mind was rumbling like thunder, and even the white hairs on his back were instantly covered in sweat. A huge sense of crisis made Yi Xian's heart tremble. Acting. This guy is definitely acting. He's not controlled by the slave seal at all. Otherwise, why is he acting so strangely when the other demons are normal? He was clearly asked to explain the situation of the black mosquito beast, but this guy was actually talking about the disgusting matter between him and the female mosquito. He's definitely doing it on purpose. He actually gave Yi Xian a feeling that he was more wretched, more cunning, and more neurotic than before. He was clearly going with the flow, taking advantage of this opportunity to make a fool of him before making his move. What's wrong, my lord? Did you say it too quickly? Do you want more details? Just as Yi Xian's heart was rumbling, and his entire body was trembling with fear, Mosquito Butcher, who was wiping his tears, turned to look at Yi Xian. Seeing Yi Xian's abnormal expression, he was stunned for a moment before asking. Then, he automatically took Yi Xian's silence as a tacit agreement. He sighed faintly, and a pitiful and indignant expression appeared on his face again. Sigh, all right, although the past is really unbearable to look back on. But since my lord likes to hear the details, I'll sacrifice again. Cough, cough, cough. Speaking of that female mosquito, it's indeed not the usual kind of coquettish. This time, I'm not referring to the stench on its body, but the coquettishness. The first time, she didn't have the bad habit of killing people with her mouth weapon while playing, so at that time, I really enjoyed it. Shut up! Even though his mind was rumbling and his entire body was enveloped by a huge sense of danger. At this moment, Yi Xian couldn't take it anymore. He steeled his heart and suddenly roared. Plop! What surprised him was that as he roared, Mosquito Butcher, who was talking with a smile on his face, was so scared that his entire body trembled. His knees went soft and he knelt down on the spot. He even stuttered. His face was pale and his body trembled uncontrollably. My lord, please calm down. Did I say something wrong? Yi Xian was stunned again. Could it be that he wasn't pretending? Otherwise, wasn't he too good at pretending? He didn't even hesitate to kneel down in front of him. Was he addicted to pretending? Just as this thought surfaced in his mind, it was immediately rejected by Yi Xian. This fellow belonged to the type of person who was proud of his achievements and looked at Yan Xing seductively. He definitely wouldn't torture himself for fun. The two were exactly the opposite. That means, I'm thinking too much? This guy was indeed controlled by the slave seal. Was the strangeness just now just a probability difference between individuals? Although this speculation was a little far-fetched, it seemed that there was no more reasonable explanation. Yi Xian gradually calmed down. At this moment, he understood that it was just a false alarm. Scram, you can hide wherever you want, but you can't leave the second floor without permission. After such a fuss, Yi Xian didn't have the mood to continue listening to this guy's detailed description of the various situations of the black mosquito demonic beast. Just looking at his face made him angry, so after coldly reprimanding him, he immediately waved his hand in disgust. No matter what the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. Later on, he would summon him for more details. Very quickly, the Mosquito Butcher jogged towards the first-level main passage on the north side of the plaza. After the Mosquito Butcher's figure disappeared, Yi Xian calmed himself down before walking away. At the same time, through the connection with the slave seal, he used his mental power to issue a new order. He ordered all the demon slaves to spread out and hide in the caves of the demons. At the same time, he secretly paid attention to see if there was any special information. After a short while, Yi Xian chose a cave in the third-level passage. After entering, he found a single room and began to condense the slave seal. Chapter 2667. The master of the second floor this time, Yi Xian went into seclusion for an entire 4 days. Only when the number of slave seals in his possession had reached more than 1,400, including the previous 300 or so, did Yi Xian let out a sigh of relief. He ended the refinement and opened his eyes. Among these 1,400-plus slave seals, there were a total of 52 of them that were enhanced versions of the elemental attribute. The so-called strengthened version was, in fact, a slave seal that had been repeatedly refined and nurtured with the power of the spirit origin. These enhanced versions of the slave seals had been refined with more psychic power and could last longer. They were more condensed, their runes more stable, their density higher, and they contained more psychic power. Therefore, the effect was also better. 50 of the 52 enhanced versions were the same as the ones on Mosquito Butcher. They had only been refined twice. The other two had been refined a total of 4 times. Yi Xian would continue to refine and temper these 2 seals until they were ready to attack Mount Naibua. As for the 50 strengthened slave seals that had only been condensed twice, Yi Xian would be using them soon. These were prepared for the elites of the Devil Cultivator on the 3rd floor. Of course, there were more than 50 of them on the 3rd floor. However, Yi Xian wasn't prepared to take all of them as demon slaves. If he could kill a portion of them, he would kill them and cut open their brains to retrieve their cores. After all, his own spiritual energy cultivation couldn't stop, and there was still the final boss to deal with. Yi Xian had to improve his cultivation in terms of the Devil Cultivator's spiritual energy, but these were all for later. What was important now was to gain full control of the entire 2nd floor. Once that was done, half of the Black Mosquito Bastion would be under Yi Xian's control. Even if it was the weaker half, it was still a measure of confidence. What's more, Yi Xian couldn't rest assured that he would continue to nibble away at the lower levels until he had complete control of the lower levels. If he wanted to rush forward, at least the rear had to be stable and peaceful. Then he wouldn't have to worry about the rear. When he thought about how the entire 2nd level of the Demon Cultivator Cave would soon fall into his control, Yi Xian immediately felt incomparably excited when he thought about how the entire 2nd level of the Demon Cultivator Cave would soon fall into his control. At that time, he would become the supreme ruler of this place, just like when he was in the 1st level of the Myriad Heaven prison. Taking a deep breath, he stepped out of the room where he'd been in seclusion for the past 4 days. He headed straight for the other 2 rooms in the same room. From now on, he decided not to choose his targets. Instead, he would slowly spread out his hunting circle. In short, wherever he went, he would attack the demon dwellers as soon as he saw them. The 2 demon scouts who were in the same cave as him were not weak either. They were both at the 5th level of the core realm. But even so, they still didn't have the chance to resist Yi Xian, who was at the 8th level of the star core realm. In less than a minute, the 2 demon cultivator scouts had become Yi Xian's new demon slaves. When all was done, Yi Xian walked out of the room and headed straight for the room on the other side of the passage. This time, Yi Xian walked out of the cave 2 minutes later. Behind him, there were 4 demon slaves following him. "All right, go about your business. I'll summon you when I need you." Waving his hand, Yi Xian didn't even look at the 6 new demon slaves that were respectfully standing at the entrance of the 2 caves. He walked towards the 2 caves that were closest to him on the same passageway. Time passed slowly. Just like that, Yi Xian didn't stop for even a moment. He walked out of one room and immediately went to the next. After an entire day and a half, he had practically walked through all the caves in the 2nd level of the Demon Dweller's Cave. When he only had 66 of the 1,400 slave seals left, Yi Xian suddenly realized that he'd been walking around for nearly 2 hours, but he still hadn't found his next target. Could it be that it's really gone? With a strange expression on his face, Yi Xian muttered a few words. Then, he activated the spirit source core in his sea of consciousness. Like a mass text message, he sent the latest order to all the slaves within his sensing range. The demons in the 4-level 1 main passages at the edge of the central square all converged toward the central square. Under the leadership of Barker, they guarded the 3 space portals. Any demon scouts that entered were immediately subdued. The rest of the slaves in the other areas spread out and formed small teams to search for the fish in the net. Following Yi Xian's orders, more than half of the 1,400 slaves in the 2nd layer immediately began to move. The other half, who were a little further away and weren't within the range of Yi Xian's sensing range, also received the news and moved out. In an instant, the entire 2nd layer of the Demon Cave area was in a complete uproar. With so many slaves searching with all their might, it took less than half an hour for them to search every nook and cranny of the 2nd layer. Needless to say, they really did find a dozen or so fish that had slipped through the net. These dozen or so fellows keenly noticed the abnormality, so they hid themselves without batting an eyelid. However, after being found out, they were still unable to escape the fate of being subdued by Yi Xian's slave seal and becoming a demon slave. In addition, during this time, There were also many demon scouts who had entered the second layer through the portals outside the Black Mosquito Bastion. Nearly 40 of them. This portion was also planted with slave seals by Yi Xian, who had rushed to the central plaza. At last Yi Xian completely cleared out the second layer. The number of slaves he had reached 1,567. In other words, nearly a sixth of the Black Mosquito Bastion's 10,000 members were now under Yi Xian's control without anyone noticing. Counting the 1,000 he'd killed before, the total number of reliable demons in the Black Mosquito Bastion's hands was less than 7,000. Of these 7,000, there were nearly 1,000 elites in the first two layers. The remaining 6,000 were ordinary scouts, all of whom were now carrying out missions outside the bastion. They were bound to return one by one to fall into the hands of Yi Xian. So long as nothing unexpected happened, in the end they would be nibbled away at little by Yi Xian. Now that the entire second layer was thoroughly cleaned out, Yi Xian immediately issued a summons to all the slaves through his psychic powers. He ordered them to gather at the central plaza within half an hour. In less than 20 minutes, all 1,567 slaves were assembled in the plaza. Among them was the wretched mosquito slayer from the third layer above. From now on, you will only serve me and obey my rules. Chapter 2668. Gui Hai Yi Dao. As Yi Xian's words spread, the bodies of more than 1,000 demon slaves in the central plaza trembled. When Yi Xian had spoken, he had activated the spirit source core in his sea of consciousness and intimidated all the demon slaves except Buck. However, he hadn't realized that among all the demon slaves in the plaza, besides Buck, who was standing at the front of the formation, the wretched mosquito slayer, who had shrunk his neck and blended in with the demon slaves, clearly didn't show such a reaction. His body suddenly trembled, and his expression turned cold. Fear appeared in his eyes. Mosquito Slayer's eyes kept darting around until he realized that all the demon slaves had the same reaction. Then he pretended to shake his shoulders, shaking off the wretched aura on the ground. After Yi Xian finished speaking, he directly handed everything over to Buck. The reason why he appointed Barker as the head of all the demonic slaves and was above everyone else wasn't just because Barker was the first demonic slave he'd subdued, but also because Yi Xian had promised him at that time. That's right, Buck's cultivation base was very low. He was only at the second level of the core realm. However, among the more than 1,000 demon slaves that Yi Xian had subdued, the highest cultivation base was at the 7th level of the core realm, which was only one level lower than his own. In fact, there were more than 400 mid-level core realm demon slaves at the 4th level and above. Even so, Yi Xian still believed that Barker was the most suitable candidate to be the demon slave general manager amongst the 1,500 over demon slaves. On one hand, it was because Buck was extremely steady and meticulous. Yi Xian had observed all the demon slaves and found that no one was more outstanding than Buck in these two aspects at the same time. In addition, the most important thing was that Yi Xian had always had an inexplicable intuition. This intuition was very profound and couldn't be explained clearly. However, he always felt that Barker would be extremely important to him in the near future, the kind that he couldn't do without. Part of the reason Yi Xian supported Barker was because he followed this kind of intuition. In fact, Buck's performance didn't disappoint him. Although his cultivation base was only at the 2nd level of the core realm, Buck didn't feel the slightest bit of stage fright in front of this huge formation of more than 1,500 demon slaves. His expression was solemn and his voice was low but firm. His words were clear and organized. He actually quickly announced the hierarchy of the demon slaves on the spot. From then on, the demon slaves would be divided into small groups of 10 with a decurion. 100 would be divided into a medium group, with a centurion leading 10 small groups. 1,000 would be a large group with a chiliarch leading 10 medium groups. Right now, there were only around 1,500 demonic slaves, so there was only 1,000-man battalion. The chiliarch was the only 7th-rank demonic slave, someone called Gui Hai Yi Dao. As for the 10 centurions in the 1,000-man brigade, Barker gave Gui Hai Yi Dao the authority to choose and appoint them. Of the remaining 500 or so demon slaves, only 6 centurions would be appointed for the time being. Once there were 1,000 demon slaves in the future, the chiliarch would be chosen. With just a few simple words, the entire management structure of the demon slaves was clearly laid out. In the future, each level would be in charge of the next. The aura and appearance of the entire demon slaves would be renewed very soon. All of this caused Yi Xian, who was standing to the side, to secretly nod his head. He deeply felt that the decision to choose Barker as the head of the demon race was too wise. After the entire management structure was laid out, Buck announced on the spot that there would be an hour for Guihai Dao and the other 6 centurions to choose their direct subordinates. Then, the selected demon slaves would be chosen one level at a time. Finally, the Decurions would choose 10 demon slaves to be in their own small groups. With a single order, the entire central plaza instantly became lively, but it was still orderly. In just 50 minutes, the plaza was once again quiet. All of the demon slaves had already lined up according to the new arrangement. On the left was a complete battalion of 1,000. Guihai Dao stood at the very front. Although the square formation behind him was a hole, it could be vaguely seen that there were 10 large blocks. Each large block could be divided into 10 smaller blocks. On the right, there were only 6 centurions forming a large block. One of them was even incomplete with less than 100 people. My lord, I seem to have been left behind. Just as Yi Xian was examining the newly organized group of devil cultivators and feeling extremely satisfied, a wretched and somewhat lacking in confidence voice suddenly appeared. All the demon slaves looked towards the source of the voice, and a strange expression appeared on their faces. Everyone, including Yi Xian and Buck, reacted the same way. The one who spoke was the wretched mosquito butcher. At this moment, he was standing alone in the empty space between the 2 square formations. His head was lowered, and his face was full of grievance and resentment. His mustache was trembling, and it was obvious that he was very angry. There was no doubt that no one wanted this guy at all. Even the Decurion, who only had 3 demon slaves because there was no one else to choose from, didn't want him. Yi Xian was stunned for a few seconds. Then his face turned slightly green, and his head started to throb. This guy was like a bag of poisonous pus. If he cut him, he would be afraid of pain. If he didn't cut him, he would become more and more annoyed. As a powerful demon slave in the satellite realm, he was the only one who could be like this. Whether it was Yi Xian or Barker, they both ignored the wretched mosquito butcher's protests and complaints. The former lightly coughed twice, then turned his head to look at the distant passageway, as if he was admiring the scenery. As for the latter, he borrowed the opportunity to assign a mission and directly skipped over this matter. According to Buck's order, from now on, 2 centurions would be stationed in the central square, and they would rotate every day and night. The mission was very simple. Capture all the demon slaves who returned from the outer space of the Graveyard Star, field through the space door, as soon as possible. Capture all the demon slaves, and send them to me when there are 100 of them. We will first fill up the 2,000-men squadrons. After that, Yi Xian nodded and interrupted at the right time. He looked at Buck, and a sharp light flashed in his eyes. Then he continued, after that, kill those who return on the spot and cut out their demon cores. If there are 100 of them, send them to me. After that, Yi Xian turned around and walked to the first-level passage on the left side of the square. He still had to condense more than 400 ordinary slave seals. After that, he should be able to slowly collect a large number of demon cores. Then, he would start to cultivate in seclusion and increase the level of his spiritual power. All of this was just preparation for entering the 3rd level soon. Chapter 2669. Condense and disintegrate. After successfully gaining control of the Black Mosquito Bastion's 2nd level, Yi Xian considered returning to the 1st level of Cataclysm and bringing the green-bearded Lu Wenxuan out to fulfill his promise. However, after thinking about it for a while, he finally gave up on this idea. The entire 2nd level of the bastion was safe, and Lu Wenxuan could leave at any time through the portal that connected to the void of the universe. However, this action would most likely be detected by the Black Mosquito Bastion's AI. After all, Lu Wenxuan wasn't a demon. At least he didn't have the psychic energy of a demon scout. Therefore, when he crossed the black membrane beneath the portal, the chances of him being detected by the Black Mosquito Bastion's AI was high. Although he was still able to calmly leave, The spatial door was only a passageway and didn't have the ability to seal those who passed through it. However, in this way it would be tantamount to exposing Yi Xian. Everything he'd done before would be for naught. What's more, with Lu Wenxuan's temperament, if he found out about Yi Xian's plan, he'd most likely refuse to leave. Since that was the case, it was better to let him remain in the cataclysm for a while longer. At least he wouldn't have to worry about his safety. After putting this matter aside, Yi Xian calmed his heart and began to focus on refining the slave seals. Of the 1,000 over slave seals from before, only 60 or so were left. As for the second demon slave, he hadn't filled it up yet. There was a difference of several hundred people, so this was the first thing Yi Xian did. When the hundreds of ordinary slave seals were completed, Barker led his men to Yi Xian's abode, escorting the 100 demons they'd captured from the central plaza. Yi Xian only left after he'd placed a slave seal on each of the 100 demons. After repeating this several times, it only took less than 2 days for the gap to be filled. Yi Xian now had 2 fully staffed 1,000-man demon slave brigade under his command. Apart from Gui Hai Dao, the chilly arch of the 2nd Demonkin Brigade was also chosen. His name was Tsang Qingyu, and he was a Demonkin powerhouse who was also at level 7 core state. He had just returned 2 days ago. If Gui Hai Dao had not been at the central square, it would have been difficult to capture him. Once the 2,000-strong demon slave brigades were full, Yi Xian told Barker not to disturb him if there was nothing important. Barker was to collect 100 demon cores from the demon slaves and deliver them to him. He was to place them directly on the small table in the abode. Then, he began to focus on condensing the strengthened version of the slave seal to deal with the demon dweller elites on the upper 2 floors. In less than 2 days, Yi Xian had refined hundreds of ordinary slave seals. In addition to the 52 that he had refined previously, he only had a total of 402 slave seals in his mind source core. Then, he stopped refining new ordinary slave seals. Instead, he repeated the process of refining the 402 slave seals. Among them, the 2 individual pills were given special attention and were refined the most times. As for the other 400 pills, they were prepared for elites of the same cultivation level as Barker, so the number of times they were refined was much lower. Just like that, Yi Xian continued to refine the 402 strengthened version slave seals day and night. Occasionally, he would stop to collect the demon cores that Barker had delivered to him from the table in the abode's hall outside the small cubicle. He would throw them directly to the devouring system to break them down before continuing to refine them. Time passed in this monotonous and boring process of refining and breaking down the demon cores. Unknowingly, 10 days had passed in the blink of an eye. Sitting cross-legged on the small cubicle bed, Yi Xian opened his eyes and fell into deep thought. The strengthened version of the slave seal should be enough. Even the 400 seals that had been refined less frequently had already surpassed the one he had used to deal with the wretched mosquito slayer. As for the other 2 pellets that had been condensed for the longest time, the number of times they were condensed was several times more. Yi Xian decided to use the remaining time to improve his psychic power. This would be the last step of his preparations before he officially set out for the 3rd floor. After that, Yi Xian would immediately rush to the 3rd floor. He had a feeling that if he delayed any longer, the changes in the lower 2 floors of the Black Mosquito Bastion would soon be exposed. This was obvious. In the 10 days that he'd been using all his strength to condense the strengthened version of the demon slave, the head of the demon slaves, Barker, had sent over nearly 2,000 demon cores. All of them were immediately thrown to the devouring system to be decomposed by Yi Xian. At this moment, these demon cores had just been decomposed, and the large amount of mental energy absorbed from them were all stored in the devouring system. Yi Xian could withdraw them at any time. Each brain represented a demon dweller scout. If Yi Xian were to include the demon core that he'd consumed earlier, the total number of demon cores he'd obtained from the beginning to the end had actually reached a terrifying amount of nearly 4,000. The entire Black Mosquito Bastion had only 10,000 demon scouts. In a short period of time, Yi Xian had killed 4,000 and taken 2,000. If one were to exclude the thousands of elite demons on the upper 2 floors, there were at most 3,000 demons left outside. Of these 3,000 or so, 200 or 300 returned almost every day. One by one, they were captured by Yi Xian's demon slaves. They were killed on the spot, their brains cut open and their cores extracted. Once the 3,000 demons had been completely wiped out, there would be no more demons coming in or out of the Black Mosquito Bastion. Such an obvious anomaly would quickly attract the attention of Mount Naibwa. If he was lured down because of this, then all would be lost. It wasn't that Yi Xian hadn't thought of letting the 2,000 demon slaves under his command continuously come in and out to create an illusion to confuse the monitoring power of the Black Mosquito Bastion. However, this method was obviously just a fool's dream and couldn't be realized at all. Because the psychic power of ordinary demon scouts was too weak, they couldn't activate the portal multiple times in a short period of time. Every time they activated it, they had to wait at least half a month before they could do it again. Under this kind of restriction, with the 2,000 demon slaves under Yi Xian's command, it was clearly far from enough to create an illusion that they were strong enough for a long time. 10 days. Within 10 days, he had to take down the 3rd and 4th floors above. Otherwise, once the 3,000 demon scouts outside were completely exhausted, the changes in the lower 2 floors of the Black Mosquito Bastion would be exposed. Thinking of this, Yi Xian, who was deep in thought and analysis, suddenly felt his heart skip a beat. In an instant, he felt a sense of urgency that he had never felt before. Within 2 days, I have to absorb all the psychic power extracted from the demonic cores by the system. After the last breakthrough in psychic power, the ability to condense slave seals appeared. I wonder if there will be a similar surprise this time. Chapter 2670. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation entering the 3rd level. Ding. All monster cores have been decomposed. Spiritual origin energy feedback has begun. Progress 1. Progress 2. As Yi Xian took the initiative to contact the devouring system and request to extract all of the spiritual origin energy obtained from decomposing the monster cores, the devouring system's notification sounded in his mind almost immediately. Immediately after, an unimaginably vast and boundless spiritual force surged over like a torrential flood from the Milky Way, roaring as it surged into Yi Xian's sea of consciousness. This kind of spiritual origin energy was formless and intangible. It could not be touched or seen, but it was incomparably real. When such a massive amount of spiritual origin energy suddenly surged violently into his knowledge sea, Yi Xian instantly felt his spirit tremble violently, as if even his primordial spirit and consciousness had begun to tremble. This kind of pain was indescribable. His entire knowledge sea was being continuously impacted and compressed by this sudden surge of spiritual origin energy, forming a tempering effect that made his knowledge sea wider and more solid. At the same time, while his knowledge sea was being rapidly spread and surged by this spiritual origin energy, the purplish-black spiritual origin energy suspended in the center of his knowledge sea also began to slowly rotate. At every moment, strands of spiritual origin energy were being absorbed into it. This process was painful yet pleasurable. Yi Xian was already drenched in sweat, but he gritted his teeth and persevered. In the end, he felt numb, and his consciousness gradually became absent-minded. Only the obsession in his heart never faded. After an unknown amount of time, Yi Xian felt as if his entire body had turned into nothingness, and his consciousness was gradually drifting away. It was as if he was an eternally exiled cosmic dust in the void of the Milky Way, slowly but unceasingly drifting away, farther and farther away, becoming more and more unreal. Suddenly, an unfamiliar yet familiar voice abruptly rang out at this moment. Ding! Congratulations to the host. Spiritual origin energy absorption complete. The level of the source core has been raised. You have obtained the spiritual origin energy skill. Do you wish to activate it? Yi Xian's body suddenly shook, and his tightly shut eyes opened in an instant. After a short period of confusion, he almost instantly remembered everything, and his eyes could not help but flash with a hint of shock. Just a moment ago, his soul had almost fallen into a whirlpool of consciousness. If it wasn't for the prompt of the devouring system, he would have fallen into an eternal slumber and never been able to wake up again. Now that he thought about it, he immediately broke out in a cold sweat and was scared. It seemed that he had underestimated the pain caused by the continuous washing and tempering of the sea of consciousness by a large amount of spirit quintessence. Even with his firm will, he was almost unable to endure it. After lamenting for a while, Yi Xian quickly adjusted his state of mind. Once he had calmed down, he issued a command to the devouring system and activated the mind skill that had appeared after his mind source core had leveled up once again. Ding! Activation successful. Congratulations! You've obtained the support type spiritual skill. Perfect shock. Absolute shock. Ding! Activation successful. Congratulations! You've obtained the attack type spiritual skill, Annihilation Spear. Vortex of Destruction. There were actually 4 types of spiritual power skills, 2 support type and 2 attack type. As this thought flashed through his mind, Yi Xian was caught off guard and was stunned on the spot. Immediately after, his entire mind was suddenly filled with a huge sense of surprise. This kind of joy and excitement was simply indescribable. After a short while, when he had calmed down slightly, he began to study the 4 unexpectedly obtained spiritual power skills. First of all, there were the 2 support-type spiritual skills, Perfect Shock and Absolute Shock. These 2 spiritual skills used an extremely complicated and unique method to form 2 completely different invisible shocks that enveloped the entire body to achieve completely different effects. Perfect Shock. Shock spiritual power forms a shield that envelopes the entire body. During the duration of the shock, everything within the shield, including sound, aura, and so on, will be perfectly isolated, as if it had completely disappeared and no longer existed. Absolute Shock. Shock spiritual power also forms a shield, but its effect is completely different. During the duration of the shock, it forms a protective state that is close to absolute defense until the spirit quintessence is completely exhausted. Of course, the defensive shield formed by absolute shock would receive different levels of attacks, and the speed and extent of the spirit quintessence depletion would also be different. If the number of attacks exceeded the total amount of spirit quintessence, then the result would be no surprise, instant kill. As for the other 2 attack-type spiritual skills, Annihilation Spear and Vortex of Destruction, the former was easy to understand. In fact, it used a unique method to compress a large amount of spirit quintessence to the extreme, making it infinitely dense and transforming it into an invisible spiritual spear to attack. On the other hand, Vortex of Destruction was the exact opposite. It did not compress, but expanded. To put it in a more abstract way, it was actually similar to nuclear fusion. However, this skill was very dangerous and was equivalent to self-destructing. Once it was used, all of the spirit quintessence would be instantly depleted, forming a destructive spiritual vortex. Therefore, it could only be used in a desperate situation. Upon understanding this, Yi Xian could not help but feel a chill run down his spine. The power of Vortex of Destruction was truly unexpected, leaving him speechless. Even so, Yangming did not let go of any of the 4 mental skills. He carefully deduced and tried to perform them a few times, and only stopped when he could release them as he wished and could use them at will. Of course, Yi Xian did not try to use the terrifyingly powerful Vortex of Destruction. He merely deduced it with his mind. When he was done, he suddenly remembered his sea of consciousness, which had just undergone an extremely intense tempering, and the spirit source core that was suspended within it. After inspecting it for a while, Yi Xian discovered that his sea of consciousness had indeed become wider and more solid. The spirit source core suspended in the middle of his sea of consciousness had become slightly bigger, and its purplish-black color had also become slightly brighter. The total amount of spirit quintessence contained within it was obviously more boundless as well. In short, Yi Xian's current strength in the Demon Dweller's spirit quintessence had increased by a large level compared to before. It was completely different from before. Immediately after, Yi Xian used his spirit quintessence to connect with the demon slave Chief Barker through the unseen perception of the slave seal. Only then did he find out that the original 2-day time limit had actually only passed by half. It was exactly 1 day and night. There are still 9 days left. The progress of advancing upwards is slightly more compact. It should be enough. As he muttered to himself, Yi Xian took a deep breath and stepped out of the cave abode where he was in seclusion. After a short while, he arrived at the central square. The wretched butcher that he had ordered Barker to summon was already waiting there. Chapter 2671. The wretched mosquito slayers bedding the Black Mosquito Bastion was divided into 4 levels of space. Due to the different functions of each level, the internal structure of each level was clearly different as well. For example, the bottommost level, the Cataclysm, was an enormous space that was dotted with numerous cages. The second level was used to house the 10,000 demon scouts of the Black Mosquito Bastion. It was a labyrinth of densely packed caverns. As for the upper 2 levels, they belonged to the wealthy of the Black Mosquito Bastion. Those who lived on these levels were all elites of the demon race. In other words, they were at least late-stage core star. Of course, not all demon cultivator scouts who had stepped into the 7th level of the Star Core realm would be able to enter the upper 2 levels. At the very least, the 2,000-man captains under Yi Xian's command were all at the 7th level of the Star Core realm. However, they were still hanging around in the 2nd level of the slums. Since it was a wealthy area, the upper 2 levels were obviously not the same as the lower 2 levels. All that was considered in terms of planning and arrangement was to make the best use of everything. It was important to note that the total number of demon elites living on the upper 2 levels was only a little more than 1,000. 1,000 demons occupied 2 whole levels of space. No matter how wasteful the construction of these 2 levels was, it was still more than enough. As for what the 4th level would be like, Yi Xian had no idea. However, the 3rd level in front of him was clearly luxurious and extravagant. It was clear that the structure of this floor did not consider practicality or making the best use of everything. Instead, it was a kind of comfort and enjoyment. This allowed the elites of the demon race to naturally develop an extremely strong sense of superiority in their lives. After stepping out of the black light membrane of the spatial door, Yi Xian immediately turned his head to look around and began to examine his surroundings. There were also 3 enormous portals behind him. Yi Xian and the wretched mosquito slayer had come out from the one on the left, while the one on the right led to the demon's pawn nest that occupied a large area on the 3rd level. This was where the Black Mosquito's cavern was located. As for the portal in the middle, it appeared to be of a higher level. Its pillars and beams were engraved with more complex runes. It was clearly the portal that led to the 4th level. Although the 3 portals were lined up in a row, they weren't like the 2nd level below. Instead, they were located in the center of a large plaza. Although it was also a plaza, it wasn't as large as the one on the 2nd level. Furthermore, there were areas in front, behind, to the left, and to the left. The square under his feet was more like an irregularly shaped, luxurious altar. 3 doors stood on the inner side, and behind them was a tall space curtain wall. Apart from the back, there was a passageway in front and on the left and right, respectively leading to different areas. The largest section was directly in front of them. It was the Black Mosquito Bastion's engine room, including its kinetic systems, weapon systems, and defense systems. Everything that was related to the Bastion's normal operations was located in this area. Of course, the Bastion's AI system was in the hands of Captain Naboshan, who was in charge of the 1st level of control. Through the AI system, he could directly control the enormous engine room. Yi Xian wasn't prepared to immediately make a move in this area. On one hand, it was because the elites of the Devil Cultivator were all relatively powerful, and on the other hand, it was because these fellows all had different positions. Once they discovered that something was amiss, they would be able to immediately send a warning to the 1st floor through the control of their positions. In addition to this computer room area that occupied the largest space, there were also 2 independent areas on the left and right. However, relatively speaking, the space and area occupied was obviously much smaller. On the left side was the living area where the elites of the demonkin lived and cultivated. To the right was the storehouse. Aside from the resources the demonkin needed, there was also everything the 10,000 demonkin scouts on the Black Mosquito Bastion had gathered day and night in the domain of the fallen. For example, planetary cores, rare materials, treasures, and the like were all stored in the storehouse. Yi Xian was quite interested in these 2 areas. To him, the living area was obviously an even higher level hunting ground. Of course, even if there weren't too many demon cultivator experts staying inside due to the rotation, there would at most be around 200 of them. However, due to their cultivation bases not being weak, this hunt was definitely not an easy task for Yi Xian. As for the warehouse area on the right, there was no need to mention it. Just thinking about the massive amount of star cores and various treasures inside caused Yi Xian's heart to thump with excitement. However, neither the living quarters on the left nor the warehouse area on the right was where Yi Xian and the wretched mosquito slayer were headed. The first place they were going to was the black mosquito demon beast's nest. The banshee's nest was indeed on this level, but it was an independent space created using spatial folding technology. Could only be entered through the portal on the right. Otherwise, even if they searched every nook and cranny of the third level, they wouldn't be able to enter. At this moment, after the master and servant walked out of the spatial door on the left, the wretched mosquito butcher raised his foot and was about to walk forward. Yi Xian coldly snorted and immediately stopped him. Seeing that there was no one around, he brought up the matter of going to the demon's nest. The wretched mosquito slayer was obviously stunned when he heard this. Then, he forced a bitter expression on his face and replied with a frown. "My lord, I'm not worried that you'll steal my job or go compete with that slut for your favor. The problem is that I really can't go now." When he heard that this guy actually had such thoughts, even thinking about how he was competing with him to serve that female mosquito, Yi Xian was caught off guard and almost fainted on the spot. Among all the demon slaves, this guy was the only one who was so weird. Sometimes, Yi Xian even wanted to strangle him to death on the spot. "My lord, you really don't believe me?" Seeing Yi Xian gnashing his teeth in anger, the wretched mosquito slayer spread his hands and continued pitifully. "It's not like you don't know why I'm going there. That female mosquito has a huge appetite. It won't let go until it's done tormenting me. Under such circumstances, if I don't make any preparations and go there casually, I'll be tortured to death on the bed. 3 days!" At this point, the wretched mosquito slayer raised his hand and gestured 3 fingers. He grinned and said, "Just give me 3 days to soak in the potion. I usually soak in it for 7 days before I dare to go to bed. I'll only give you half a day." Chapter 2672. A poisonous halo. Although he'd only managed to buy a pitiful half a day's time, the wretched mosquito slayer had no choice but to compromise in the face of Yi Xian's uncompromising tone. His head drooped, and his expression was that of someone who'd just lost his father. Sighing, he led the way to his abode. The wretched mosquito slayer's abode was also located in the elite demonkin's residential area on the left. The entire residential area was like a large, luxurious villa district. The environment was elegant and filled with greenery. Not far away were individual villas with courtyards. These villas were the residences of the elite demonkin. The wretched mosquito slayer's abode was one of them. The Black Mosquito Bastion only had about 1,000 demonkin in total. Of these, there were about 200 on the first floor and about 800 on the third floor below. Of these 800 demonkin elites, 200 were permanently stationed in the warehouse area on the right. The remaining 400 were divided into 2 groups and took turns to work in the engine room area. In other words, of the 400 or so villas in this residential area, only half of them were occupied at any given time. The 10,000 demonkin below were squeezed into the same space on the first floor, living in large bunks. The elite demonkin above, on the other hand, had left such luxurious villas empty for long periods of time. This was a huge difference, and even Yi Xian couldn't help but sigh. After entering the residential area, they hadn't gone far when the silhouettes of some of the demonkin elites began to appear. The wretched mosquito slayer immediately puffed out his chest, put his hands behind his back, and began to walk with his chin slightly raised. In order to match him, Yi Xian deliberately bent his back in an awkward manner. He kept his head down and didn't look around. It was obvious that he was one of the wretched mosquito slayer's new followers. Otherwise, the sudden appearance of an unfamiliar face in this area, where there weren't many demonkin to begin with, would obviously attract suspicious gazes. "I say, little Xian, I didn't lie to you, did I? The third floor is the real heaven. In the future, follow this old master and serve me well. Be diligent in your daily chores like serving tea, serving water, massaging shoulders, and washing feet." As he walked forward, the wretched mosquito slayer pinched his sharp, duck-like voice and began to teach Yi Xian. The words "little Shenzi" came out of his mouth without any hesitation. It was so smooth that it couldn't be any smoother. Hearing this, Xian Yi only felt that it was dark in front of him and almost fell down. Was this really his demon slave? At this moment, even Yi Xian himself had doubts about this. Since ancient times, he had never heard of someone who dared to make fun of his master's servants. However, this fellow was soon unable to be complacent. Because as his figure appeared, the demon elites in this living area, one after another, after noticing this, their expressions changed abruptly. Then, as if they were avoiding a ghost, they all turned around and returned to their own villa cave residence. For a moment, the sound of the door closing could be heard incessantly. This scene was so strange that even Yi Xian was stunned. He suddenly understood why this fellow had to stroll down to the second floor every now and then. This was clearly the rhythm of a poisonous halo. Just by being seen from afar, such a large area was automatically cleared out in an instant. You bunch of bastards, one day, I, Master Mosquito Slayer, will bring out that smelly female mosquito and have you line up to serve her one by one. Seeing this familiar scene in front of him, the wretched Mosquito Slayer, who was usually a little angry at most, but usually would quickly return to his cave residence in a sullen mood, actually roared loudly. This scene fell into the eyes of Yi Xian, although he did not know what kind of reaction the wretched Mosquito Slayer would have when he encountered such a situation. But this fellow had been hanging around in the third floor of the demon elite living area for 3 whole years. Judging from the behavior of those demon elites just now, it was obvious that they usually had this kind of attitude when they saw this fellow. Since that was the case, after 3 whole years, the wretched Mosquito Slayer should not have been so indifferent, right? No matter what, he should not have such a strong reaction. In addition, the content of the words that he had just blurted out in anger and embarrassment. Yi Xian frowned slightly as he pondered. In his mind, he faintly felt that he was about to grasp an important key. Unfortunately, that trace of inspiration only appeared halfway before it sank back down and could not be found again. However, after this incident, Yi Xian subconsciously became more cautious of the wretched Mosquito Slayer. Of course, he would not show any of this. At this moment, seeing that all the demon elites had returned to their own cave mansions, the wretched Mosquito Slayer also felt bored. In addition, time was of the essence, so after grumbling angrily for a while, he took the lead and walked far away to the cave mansions on the western side of the border. This was within Yi Xian's expectations. For an existence like him who had a poisonous halo, it would be strange if he did not live in such a remote border area. Soon, the two of them entered the wretched Mosquito Slayer's cave mansions. As the door closed, this fellow's demeanor immediately took a 180-degree turn, and he returned in the blink of an eye. He nodded and bowed as he took the initiative to retreat behind Yi Xian. With a smile on his face, anyone could tell at a glance that this was a dog of a slave. Did you have a good time just now? Little Xian, you've been muttering those words in your heart for a long time, haven't you? Otherwise, you wouldn't have been able to speak so smoothly. You just opened your mouth and said it. As he casually walked around the mansions, Yi Xian quietly mocked and ridiculed him. At the same time, he secretly observed this fellow's reaction from the corner of his eye. The wretched Mosquito Slayer immediately began to explain in a panic. In any case, he already had a ready-made excuse. In order to cover up Yi Xian's identity, he opened his mouth and said it with sincerity. He looked like he would protect his master with his life, so Yi Xian really did not see anything wrong with him. However, the more he could not see the problem, the more it meant that there was definitely a problem. Otherwise, why was it that among the other 2,000 demon slaves, there was not even one who knew how to flatter and take the opportunity to offend someone like him? They were all subdued with the slave seal. Even if there were differences between them, this fellow was originally a weirdo, so the possibility of him mutating was not completely impossible. However, it should not be so exaggerated, right? As these thoughts flashed through his mind, Yi Xian could not help but recall the words that the wretched Mosquito Slayer had roared out in a moment of embarrassment and anger. Faintly, he suddenly felt that the glimmer of light that he had not grasped before seemed to be coming to him again. Couldn't tell. You're dressed so wretched and sloppy, but your cave mansions are so neat and tidy. After saying that, Yi Xian casually glanced at the wretched mosquito butcher behind him and casually continued. To be able to keep their living quarters in such an orderly manner without a single speck of dust, they are usually people with meticulous minds and introverted personalities. This isn't like you, it's really impressive. Hee, my lord, don't praise me like that. It's just that I usually tidy up when I'm free. Chapter 2673. Assimilation of the slave seal. Before Yi Xian began to suspect the wretched mosquito slayer, he would immediately feel uncomfortable just thinking about this guy, let alone seeing him. He would have the urge to immediately call him over and strangle him to death on the spot. But now, after he began to suspect the wretched mosquito slayer, the strong feeling of disgust inexplicably disappeared. Perhaps this was because Yi Xian had more or less confirmed that this guy's extremely wretched appearance was actually just a disguise. This wasn't his true nature. Instead, he was very cautious and patient, and most likely did not lack some kind of firm belief or Tao heart. This could be seen from the fact that he had tidied up the huge space in this villa. Of course, even so, Yi Xian didn't dislike him that much. If he had a good impression of him, then no matter what, it was impossible. Yi Xian originally thought that this guy had to soak himself in the medicinal water before going to serve the black mosquito slayer was just an excuse. His purpose was to stay in this villa for a few more days to prepare some kind of method. But when he saw that this guy had actually placed a huge bathtub in the side room of the villa's first floor, and there was indeed a strong medicinal fragrance in the air, Yi Xian finally understood. Based on the smell, the medicinal herbs that emitted this smell should have some special effects that could stimulate the body's strength and make it stronger for a short period of time. From this, it could be seen that this guy was not fooling around. He really only wanted to come back and soak himself in the medicinal water for a few days. In other words, if this guy was indeed faking it, then this was not his plan. Moreover, if the premise that he was not subdued and controlled by the slave seal was true, then why would he, a powerful existence with a satellite realm cultivation base, have to compromise so much and even kneel down in front of a small core realm ant like himself? This was obviously a scheme. Although there were many things on Yi Xian that were worthy of his schemes, whether it was the devouring system or the supergrade warship Purple Star Shuttle, he had no idea. Then, the only possibility left was the slave seal. Thinking of this, Yi Xian's eyes suddenly lit up. In an instant, he completely understood everything at this time. The wretched mosquito slayer had already entered the side room and was making a racket in the medicine barrel. Yi Xian, who was left alone in the living room, pondered for a while before finally sitting cross-legged on the sofa. He closed his eyes and began to refine the 402 slave seals in his hands. In just half a day, it was clearly far from enough to refine all of these slave seals, even if it was just once. Yi Xian did not intend to do that. What he wanted to do now was to fuse the two slave seals that had been condensed for the longest time and the most times into one. Since the slave seal could be refined repeatedly, it could naturally be fused as well. This kind of fusion was actually the same as the effect of repeated refinement. After two ordinary slave seals were fused together, the effect was equivalent to a strengthened slave seal that had been refined twice. The reason why Yi Xian had not used this method to obtain the strengthened slave seal before was because of the efficiency. Refining two ordinary slave seals separately and then fusing them together again to form a strengthened slave seal that had been refined twice. By doing this, Yi Xian would have to refine the slave seal 3 times. On the other hand, if he directly refined an ordinary slave seal and then refined it again, the final result would also be a strengthened slave seal that had been refined twice. However, by doing this, Yi Xian would only need to refine the slave seal twice. With a 50% difference in efficiency, he naturally had to choose the latter. But now, for the sake of stability, Yi Xian had no choice but to use this method to fuse the slave seal. After some analysis, Yi Xian now knew why using the slave seal to subdue the wretched mosquito slayer ended in failure. In the end, it was actually his own carelessness. The demon slaves on the second floor of the Demon Dwellers' Cave residence area were all at the core state. The core state was the first major realm of the Starry Sky level. Therefore, Yi Xian successfully subdued them with an ordinary slave seal that had only been refined once. The wretched satellite state was the third major realm of the Starry Sky level. If Yi Xian's guess was correct, in order to successfully subdue this guy, he would need at least a slave seal that had been refined thrice. In order to make a clearer description and distinction, let's call it a level 3 slave seal. But in reality, What Yi Qing used on him back then was only a level 2 slave seal that had been condensed twice. This was the key to his failure. By analogy, the black mosquito mother beast, whose cultivation had reached the 8th major realm, the black hole state, would need at least a level 8 slave seal to successfully subdue it. This time, the most crucial part of Yi Xian's entry into the 3rd floor was to subdue this beast. Otherwise, with his strength alone, it would be a joke if he wanted to clear 2 floors in just 8 days. Therefore, there was no room for carelessness. All the preparations had to be completed according to the strictest requirements. Now, among the 402 slave seals in his hands, there were 400 level 3 slave seals that had been refined thrice, and the remaining 2 were level 8 slave seals that had been refined 8 times. Although he already had level 8 slave seals, Yi Xian dared not let his guard down. What if the level 8 slave seals did not work? Wouldn't he be completely screwed? With this in mind, he gritted his teeth and decided to fuse them. The reason why he was so reluctant was because the more he fused 2 slave seals, the more the loss outweighed the gain. After fusing 2 level 1 slave seals, there was almost no loss and he obtained a level 2 slave seal. However, after fusing 2 level 2 slave seals, the loss began to appear, and he only obtained a level 3 slave seal. After fusing 2 level 3 slave seals, he only obtained a level 4 slave seal. By analogy, if Yi Xian fused the 2 level 8 slave seals in his hands, he would only obtain a level 9 slave seal in the end. Of course, he could also directly refine the 2 level 8 slave seals separately instead of fusing them together. This way, he would obtain 2 level 9 slave seals in the end. Unfortunately, there was not enough time. The further he progressed, the longer the time needed to refine the slave seals. It would take an entire day to refine a level 8 slave seal and upgrade it to level 9. And it would only take 2 hours to refine 2 level 8 slave seals to level 9. Yi Xian could delay his trip to the demon's nest by 1 or 2 days, but this would definitely arouse the suspicion of the wretched mosquito butcher. Even though he now had many level 3 slave seals in his hands and could truly subdue the wretched mosquito butcher at any time, Yi Xian considered that the wretched mosquito butcher's temperament would most likely change because of this real subduing. When that time came, it was inevitable that the black mosquito female beast would notice something unusual. Therefore, Yi Xian did not dare to do so. Chapter 2674. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Entering the mosquito nest 2 hours later, Yi Xian successfully fused the 2 rank 8 slave seals into a rank 9 slave seal. Yi Xian did not touch the remaining 400 rank 3 slave seals. Even if he could not control the Black Mosquito Queen's rank 9 slave seal, he would not be able to upgrade it to a rank 10 slave seal in a short amount of time. Only those of the same level could fuse with each other. In order to fuse a level 10 slave seal, one would need 2 level 9 slave seals. Of course, Yi Xian could also use these 400 level 3 slave seals to fuse with them. 2 rank 3 slave seals would fuse into a rank 4 slave seal. 2 rank 4 slave seals would fuse into a rank 5 slave seal. In the end, he would only need to consume 64 rank 3 slave seals to obtain a rank 9 slave seal. But the time, even though fusing slave seals only took about 2 hours, due to the large number of attempts, it would take about 2 days to fuse 64 rank 3 slave seals into a rank 9 slave seal. Therefore, Yi Xian decided to give up in the end. 1 rank 9 slave seal should be enough to control the Black Hole Realm Black Mosquito Queen. The rank 9 slave seal only took a little more than an hour to fuse. However, the time Yi Xian promised to bathe the Mosquito Queen in the potion was half a day, so there were still 3 to 4 hours left. Yi Xian was bored, so he wanted to go outside and see if he could find a chance to subdue a few demon slaves on the 3rd floor. However, after some hesitation, he gave up on the idea. The demons on the 3rd floor were all elites with cultivations above the 7th level of the Star Core realm. In fact, nearly half of them were no longer at the Star Core realm. With Yi Xian's current strength, he really didn't have much confidence in being able to silently complete all of this. The most important thing now was to subdue the Black Mosquito Queen. He should not cause any more trouble. With that in mind, Yi Xian started fusing the slave seals again, but this time he did not use the rank 9 slave seal. Instead, he fused the 400 rank 3 slave seals into a rank 4 slave seal. It would take more than 2 hours to fuse 2 grade 8 crystals into a grade 9 crystal, but it would take a lot less time to fuse 2 grade 3 crystals into a grade 4 crystal. After an entire afternoon, Yi Xian had fused half of it. 203 levels had been turned into 100 level 4. Right now, he only had 301 slave seals. 1 level 9 slave seal, 100 level 4 slave seals, and 200 level 3 slave seals. At this time, the wretched mosquito slayer had also finished soaking in the potion. He changed into a very flashy outfit and walked out of the side room. It seemed that the effect of the potion was quite good. In just half a day, the wretched mosquito slayer seemed to have changed into a different person. His whole body was exuding an invisible vitality, and he was in high spirits, as if he had just been injected with chicken blood. Hee. I wonder what Master is going to do in that demon nest? Seeing Yi Xian, the wretched mosquito slayer, who had been walking out of the side room with his chest puffed out, immediately lowered his back and walked over with a grin. If Master has something important to do in there, remember to wait for me to hold that mosquito queen back. Although I only soaked in the potion for half a day today, the effect is quite good. I am full of energy now. Not to mention a mosquito, even if it is an elephant, I am confident that I can defeat it. It sounded casual, but it was obviously probing. Yi Xian sneered in his heart. He also casually replied, facing a black hole realm mosquito demon? What kind of important matter could I possibly have to do? I have never seen this kind of demon beast before, so I just want to broaden my horizons. Then I'm relieved. If it's just to broaden your horizons, you can just stay in the periphery after you enter. When that female mosquito and I are working, you can just sneak a few glances outside the central nest. These words made Yi Xian feel a little awkward. As the two talked, they left the wretched mosquito slayer's villa and walked toward the small plaza outside the elite demon dwellings. When they arrived at the plaza, the wretched mosquito slayer activated the space door on the other side with familiar ease. As the black film of light appeared, the two stepped in at the same time, and their figures quickly disappeared from the small plaza. When they reappeared, the two were already in the small independent space of the Black Mosquito Queen's nest. As soon as they entered this space, a large cloud of extremely dense black fog rushed toward them. Yi Xian took a deep breath, and the mental power source core in his knowledge shook slightly. He instantly felt his mental power become more active. He had heard from Barker that the black fog that filled the entire space of the Black Mosquito Queen was created by this female mosquito, and that it was very beneficial for demon dwellers' mental power cultivation. Yi Xian had already discovered this when he was on the first floor of the Myriad Hells. Now that he had entered the female mosquito's nest, the dense black fog made him feel even more deeply. How is it, my lord? The black fog inside the bastion is the mating aura that the female mosquito emits when it flees. Although it is a little strange, it is very beneficial for demon dwellers' mental power cultivation. The wretched mosquito slayer turned to look at Yi Xian with a dirty look on his face. Do you know why I reached the satellite state in 3 years? When I came up, I was only at the star core state. In fact, it was because I was intimate with that coquettish mosquito. Breathing in its mating aura is so beneficial to our mental power. You can imagine how beneficial it is to have sex with that mosquito. He sounded as if he had gotten a great bargain. Yi Xian felt his hair stand on end when he heard this, and he quickly held his breath. He decided that he would never breathe in the coquettish mosquito's mating aura again, even if he was beaten to death, because it was used as a nest for the Black Mosquito Queen. This small independent space called the Demon Nest was different from other places. It looked like a natural cave, and Yi Xian and the wretched mosquito slayer were standing on the outskirts of this cave. There was a space door behind them, and there were several passageways in front of them. The entire female mosquito's nest extends in all directions, but any of the passageways in front of us can lead to the center of the nest. That is the true core of the female mosquito's nest. It's basically there. This creature is very lazy. Seeing that Yi Xian was looking at the passageways, the wretched mosquito slayer immediately introduced them. Then he changed the topic and said, I'm going to serve that female mosquito. My lord, you can wander around by yourself. When we are working and that coquettish mosquito lets down its guard, "My lord, you can pick a passageway and walk to the end. Just take a look from afar. I'll come back here to find you later, and then we'll leave together." As he spoke, the wretched mosquito slayer grinned at Yi Xian, then turned and ran toward one of the passageways. Chapter 2675. Translator. Nyoibo Studio Editor. Nyoibo Studio. Great benefits. The wretched mosquito killer had indeed not been controlled by Yi Xian's slave seal. At that time, Yi Xian had not fully understood some of the properties of the slave seal. He had only used a level 2 slave seal on the mosquito killer, so he had failed. On this point, Yi Xian's deduction was correct. However, he believed that the reason why the wretched mosquito butcher pretended to be crazy and recognized him as his master was because of his slave seal. He was completely wrong. The wretched mosquito killer was indeed interested in the slave seal. Although the level 2 slave seal that Yi Xian had used on him had not been able to completely control the wretched mosquito killer, the level 2 slave seal still had some effect. Therefore, the wretched mosquito killer's dazed expression at the beginning had not been an act. However, when the level 2 slave seal's effect had completely worn off, it had not succeeded in controlling the wretched mosquito killer. By the time he had gradually regained consciousness, Yi Xian had already led the other demon slaves to plant slave seals on the other demon scouts who had accidentally encountered the operation and participated in it. They had also removed the brains of those demon corpses. At that time, the wretched mosquito killer had already had the ability to resist, although the level 2 slave seal had affected his mental state and prevented him from fully displaying his strength for a short period of time. However, he was still a satellite state expert. Even if he was not in his best state, it would not be a problem for him to deal with a group of Starcore state ants. However, he was extremely shocked by Yi Xian's slave seal and his act of removing the brains of the demon corpses. He could see that Yi Xian had a secret realm. The slave seal was not a big deal, but the act of removing the brains of the demon corpses was not only shocking, but it also made his heart pound with eagerness. He suddenly had a bold guess in his heart. If this guess was true, then the benefits he would obtain in the end were simply unimaginable. To put it simply, he would become the master of the entire Black Mosquito Bastion in one leap, replace Naibuishan's current position, and seize his power. Such a tempting and huge benefit made him, a satellite state expert, pretend to be crazy and kneel in front of a Starcore state ant. What was the big deal? Of course, he could have made a move at that time and used force to subdue Yi Xian and force him to reveal his secrets. However, in order to play it safe, the wretched mosquito slayer did not do so in the end. On one hand, he was worried that Yi Xian would throw in another mysterious energy that could penetrate his skin and enter his body. At that time, he would be in a daze for a while. If all the demons swarmed him at that time and tore him apart, that would be too tragic. On the other hand, due to his cautious nature and meticulous mind, he was able to control so many demons through Yi Xian without anyone noticing. He immediately deduced that Yi Xian would definitely enter the 3rd floor. As long as Yi Xian went to the 3rd level, he would have a way to trick him into the Devil's Nest. After entering the Devil's Nest, everything he had planned would be in the bag. For example, now that he had brought Yi Xian into the Devil's Nest, the wretched mosquito slayer did not plan to keep an eye on him and let him roam freely. In any case, Yi Xian could not activate the space door, so even if he roamed around, he would still be in the Devil's Nest's independent space. What he had to do now was to persuade the female mosquito. Once she was moved, he would immediately make a move on Yi Xian. From then on, everything he had planned would officially begin. Yi Xian was unaware of all this. However, he knew that the wretched mosquito slayer must have brought him to this Devil's Nest for a reason. However, all this did not matter. Didn't Yi Xian have his own plans too? Both sides had their own plans and advantages. The wretched mosquito slayer's advantage was that he was stronger than Yi Xian, and at the same time, he had an even stronger mosquito lover. Oh no, it should be his lover. On the other hand, Yi Xian's advantage was that he had already realized that the wretched mosquito slayer was plotting something. He also had the slave seal in his hands, which was enough to control the other party. As for the powerful female mosquito, Yi Xian also had his own plans. As soon as the wretched mosquito slayer left, He immediately urged the mind source core in his sea of consciousness and used a large amount of mind power to activate the perfect oscillation technique. Buzz! An extremely weak buzzing sound was heard. Then, a massive amount of mind power enveloped Yi Xian's entire body. With his body as the center, everything within a 1-meter radius seemed to have been directly gouged out of this space. It was as if they no longer existed. Yi Xian could no longer sense any aura from his entire body. However, Yi Xian's mind source power was constantly being consumed to maintain the efficient operation of the perfect oscillation technique. Although this consumption was not too frightening, it was not easy either. With the total amount of mind source power stored in the mind source core in Yi Xian's sea of consciousness, it could only last for about a day at most. It was obviously enough to hide his body and launch a sneak attack on the female mosquito. After doing all this, Yi Xian prepared the level 9 slave seal. He immediately chose a passage and silently groped his way in. The entire devil's nest was like a cave of coiling silk. It was full of passages in all directions. In the center of these intertwined passages was a large hall about 100 meters in diameter. Although it was called a large hall, it actually looked like a natural cave. There were no daily human amenities in the devil's nest, such as tables and stools. There was only a mosquito nest that was piled up by a large amount of black withered grass. Of course, this so-called bird's nest was extraordinarily large. It occupied the entire area of the large hall, which was about 100 meters in diameter. To put it in perspective, the entire central devil's nest was actually a large bed that looked like a bird's nest. If one jumped down from any of the passages on the walls of the cave, they would fall directly into the bird's nest, which was equivalent to getting on the bed. Right now, there was a monster lying on the bed. It was a mosquito that was about the same size as a human. For a mosquito to be able to grow to the size of a human was indeed extremely frightening. However, although this mosquito's torso was still that of a mosquito, its head and limbs were no different from a human's. Judging from its head, this strange mosquito was indeed female. That was because its head was clearly a woman's face. Furthermore, it was an extremely bewitching and charming woman's face. Yi Xian, who had just walked to the end of a passage, saw everything clearly. The strange thing was that he had already arrived, but the wretched mosquito butcher was still nowhere to be seen. There was only the female mosquito in the mosquito nest below. There was no one else. Chapter 2676. Get out herein his line of sight. The bruised and wretched mosquito slayer was wiping his tears as he jumped towards the mosquito nest bed below. He was still crying and complaining. When the words, darling, and the self-proclaimed Luin family entered Yi Xian's ears, it caused him to feel as if he'd been struck by lightning. His eyes widened in shock, and his mind was shaken to the point where he almost interrupted the perfect vibration of his mental skill. Soon, that guy landed in the big bed of the mosquito nest below. Then, he used his hands and feet to crawl toward the female mosquito that was lying there and giggling. He then laid down beside the female mosquito and hugged it in his arms. As he cried and complained, he used his other hand to caress the female mosquito's inhuman body. It was an expression of extreme thirst. He was still crying and complaining, but he already couldn't wait. Such a strange scene caused Yi Xian to feel awkward, but at the same time, it caused him to suddenly sigh with emotion. Amazing! No wonder he arrived later than Yi Xian. In order to gain sympathy, this guy punched him in the face in an unknown passage. Otherwise, how could he explain the bruises on his face? He just didn't know what this guy was planning to do, and how he planned to do it. Why did he have to treat him like this, and put on such a show in front of a female mosquito? Just as Yi Xian was sighing, the two guys below seemed to have reached the point of passion, and started to do something that would make one's face turn red. However, because the other one was a female mosquito, this kind of action that would make one's face turn red instantly turned into a bone-chilling cold. If he hadn't been waiting for this kind of opportunity, Yi Xian would have turned around and left. Frowning slightly, Yi Xian resisted the discomfort in his heart. He gritted his teeth and didn't turn around, but he didn't immediately make a move either. The two of them had just started. The female mosquito was still on top, But Yi Xian heard from the wretched mosquito slayer that when the female mosquito was excited, it would flip over and press the wretched mosquito slayer underneath. Generally speaking, women would become wilder when they were on top, and presumably the female mosquito was the same. Since it was wilder, it meant that its mental attention was extremely focused on something, and its sensitivity to other things would be lower. When that happened, it would be the best time for Yi Xian to make a move. After all, his opponent was a powerful female mosquito with a black hole cultivation base, so Yi Xian had to be as cautious as possible. Soon the time arrived. As the female mosquito flipped over and pressed down on the wretched mosquito butcher, who was crying out because of comfort or pain, it was unknown whether it was because of the wretched mosquito butcher. Then, it started to scream and drive. Yi Xian finally took action. Yangming enveloped the rank 9 slave seal with his mental power and quietly let it land on the mosquito bed below, where it slowly approached the female mosquito that was riding the wretched mosquito. The speed was very slow and very gentle. It was as if a snowflake was silently falling to the ground. The exit at the end of the passageway that Yi Xian was currently at was about 20 meters away from the bed. Although it was only a short distance of 20 meters, it took 2 to 3 minutes for the mental power wrapped around the level 9 slave seal to descend. During this time, Yi Xian's heart had been in his throat. Although it had only been 2 to 3 minutes, it felt like 2 to 3 years had passed. When the mental power finally landed on the female mosquito's neck and merged with it, Yi Xian's heart, which had been hanging in the air all this time, finally calmed down by half. However, it was only half done. Although the level 9 slave seal had already entered the female mosquito's body, Yi Xian wasn't completely confident that it would be able to successfully control it. After all, he had already failed once with the wretched mosquito slayer. That mistake was enough for Yi Xian to learn a lesson and become even more cautious. Therefore, he didn't intend to reveal himself. He continued to urge the power of the origin source in his mind power source core to maintain the perfect oscillation. Although he wasn't afraid of the wretched mosquito slayer, if the female mosquito wasn't successfully controlled, then Yi Xian would at least have a chance to turn the situation around. He wouldn't be killed on the spot. Yi Xian had previously learned that in the demonic dweller's ancestral star zone, demonic beasts like the black mosquito mother mosquito slayer also had a monster core in their brains, just like the demonic dwellers. In fact, when the demonic dwellers were stationed in the 10 space fortresses in the third universe of the human race, the 10 guardian demonic beasts had all been captured by the demonic dwellers' commander-level existences. They had used a powerful secret spiritual technique to leave restrictions in their monster cores. That was why the demonic beasts had obeyed orders and willingly stayed in the space fortresses to become guardian beasts. Since there were monster cores, then Yi Xian's slave seal should be useful. In fact, this was indeed the case. At this moment, as the level 9 slave seal entered the body of the black mosquito magical beast, the female mosquito that was riding on the wretched mosquito butcher suddenly stopped moving. It was like a robot that had run out of batteries. It stopped moving and stood there in a daze. The wretched mosquito slayer, who had obviously entered a state of mind, obviously hadn't realized that something was wrong. The guy's eyes were blurred as he mumbled, "What's wrong, dear? Why aren't you moving? Do you want more?" Such coquettish words had been said by a wretched middle-aged man in a coquettish tone that made one shudder all over. Yi Xian felt his stomach churn as he gritted his teeth. This guy was indeed poisonous. Even if he was faking it, the fact that he was able to feign such a state showed that he wasn't an ordinary poison. He was highly toxic, and no one dared to approach him. However, when he realized that after acting coquettishly for a while, the female mosquito riding on him still didn't move, the wretched mosquito slayer finally realized that something was wrong. He immediately opened his eyes. What he saw was that the female mosquito's eyes were blurred, as if its consciousness had fallen into a dreamland. The person was still here, but its consciousness was no longer in sync. He had encountered such a situation before, so he understood it at a glance. F***CK. Are you crazy, kid? Even this old man can't control that little thing of yours. How dare you make a move on it? The wretched mosquito slayer stared blankly at the female mosquito in a strange state for a few seconds. He then flipped over and stood up on the soft bed of the mosquito nest below. He raised his head and looked at the exits at the ends of the tunnels on the walls of the mosquito nest. Then he roared in exasperation. After all this time, you actually came to this demon nest because you wanted to make a move on it? Come out. Get the F***CK out of here. Chapter 2677. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. A blessing in disguise. From the words of the wretched mosquito slayer, Yi Xian could tell that this guy had brought him to this demon nest because he wanted to get his hands on the mother black mosquito beast. But that was not right. If that was the case, he should have at least gotten the slave seal from Yi Xian first. That was not right either. The wretched mosquito slayer had clearly said that Yi Xian's slave seal could not even subdue him. If that was the case, even if the wretched mosquito slayer really wanted to get his hands on the black mosquito demon beast, he would definitely not be planning to use the slave seal to do so. He did not even care about the slave seal, so why would he place his hopes on the slave seal? For a moment, Yi Xian was confused and could not figure it out. At this moment, the wretched mosquito butcher below raised his head and roared at his surroundings for a while. However, after not seeing Yi Xian appear, he seemed to have temporarily forgotten about this matter. In any case, he was sure that Yi Xian wouldn't be able to escape even if he wanted to. So he used both his hands and feet to crawl towards the black mosquito mother beast that had just been pushed to the side in a moment of desperation. At this moment, it was still in a confused state, and it was obvious that its mental consciousness was being corroded and affected by the 9th level slave seal. After hugging the mother black mosquito slayer, the wretched mosquito slayer anxiously shook the mother black mosquito slayer's body and muttered some words continuously. "Darling, wake up. Why are you still like this? This shouldn't be. What's my cultivation base? What's your cultivation base? I'm only in the satellite state, and this wretched slave seal only stunned me for less than 3 minutes. With your cultivation base of black hole state level 6, it should be useless against you. How is it possible that you're still confused after so long? This doesn't make sense. Darling, let's stop playing, okay? Don't scare me. Didn't you say that as long as you can obtain a large amount of spiritual origin energy and break through to the advanced black hole state level 7, you will be able to break through the spiritual restriction that the tribe's great commander left in your demon core when he captured you? Then you won't have to be afraid of the seal in Naibwa Mountain's hands anymore, right? Who does Naibwa Mountain think he is? He's just a black hole state level 3, he's not even in the intermediate black hole state. If he doesn't have that seal, how can he think he can be so cocky in front of a being in the intermediate black hole state? My darling, wake up, we have hope. I brought you a man. That I brought you a treasure. That guy has cut a large amount of demon cores. And I have only been in contact with him for a few days, but he has only a few days mind points. His is translation. Is you, translation. Is you on. Is. Oh, my darling. Wake up. I told you everything. Why are you still pretending? Don't let anything happen to you. I'm still hoping to help you refine the mental barrier. Then, after we destroy Mount Naibwa, the two of us will take the Black Mosquito ship and quietly return to the demon territory. We'll capture a bunch of demons as slaves and live a carefree life together. Why did you suddenly become like this? Oh. As he spoke, the wretched mosquito slayer saw no reaction from the female black mosquito slayer in his arms. He was still in a confused state, so it was clear that there was no hope. In the end, he started sobbing like there was no hope at all. Yi Xian was completely shocked when he heard his words. This wretched mosquito slayer was so shrewd and ambitious. He did not expect that everything he did was to help the black mosquito beast break free from the mind restriction set by the demon tribe's great commander. He did not need to fear the mother seal in Mount Naibwa's hands. Then he could eliminate Mount Naibwa and take over the black mosquito fortress. Amidst his shock, Yi Xian secretly rejoiced. He never thought that the cultivation of this black mosquito beast would actually reach the great perfection of the 6th step of the black hole realm. With just one more step, it would be able to enter the late stage of the black hole realm. Although they were in the same realm, the difference between the late stage and the middle stage was like heaven and earth. Yi Xian personally experienced this when he stepped into the 7th Order from the core realm from the 6th Order. A powerful black hole realm demonic beast could not be subdued by a mere level 8 slave seal. After all, the black hole realm demonic beast was equivalent to a quasi-9th Order demonic beast. Now, Yi Xian had obviously succeeded. The black mosquito mother beast had been trapped under the influence of the rank 9 slave seal for such a long time. If it could break free with its black hole realm cultivation base, it would have broken free a long time ago. The wretched mosquito slayer was obviously well aware of this. After all, he had experienced it once himself. It was because of this that the wretched mosquito slayer was so desperate at this moment. He was about to cry out loud. Thinking of this, Yi Xian's heart immediately calmed down. His heart, which had been hanging in his throat all this time, finally returned to his chest. Even so, Yi Xian still didn't plan on showing himself now. The wretched mosquito butcher's accidental failure back then had given him too much of a warning. As long as there was even the slightest bit of uncertainty, he had to be cautious. The other party was a black hole realm existence. Ha ha ha, what a blessing in disguise. The black mosquito beast, was forced to leave the demonic beast galaxy and could no longer obtain spiritual origin energy to cultivate. After that, I was trapped in this space fortress and could not leave. When I was free, I thought of countless scenarios, but I never thought that I, the black mosquito beast, would use this method to break through to late 7th Order demonic beast. Little guy hiding in the dark. Thank you very much. Just as Yi Xian's heart was calming down and he was secretly thinking that as long as the black mosquito beast was completely subdued and left this confused state, he would immediately descend and deal with the wretched mosquito slayer. Suddenly, the black mosquito beast's triumphant laughter came from below. Could not hide its ecstasy. Although I don't know what the spiritual seal you put in my body is, it is definitely more powerful than the spiritual seal that the great commander of the demonic beast tribe left in my brain. What's more, they repel and are hostile to each other. As soon as this thing entered my brain, it and the spiritual seal consumed each other. It is indeed powerful. When the spiritual seal left by the great commander of the demonic beast tribe was completely destroyed, it still had a small part of its power. Chapter 2678. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations falling into the devil's claws at this point. The mother mosquito actually shook its head and sighed emotionally. Then, it muttered to itself again. On the other hand, whether it's this mysterious spiritual mark or the spiritual restriction left behind by the great demon commander, they are all the purest spiritual origins after being melted away. This is what this humble one desires the most. With this purest spirit source, this humble one can finally break through in one fell swoop. Little guy, thank you? Speaking of this, the black mosquito smiled and looked at Yi Xian from afar below. The wretched mosquito slayer, who suddenly saw the black mosquito wake up, was stunned. Not only was it not angry, but it was also so happy. Hearing the black mosquito magical beast's proud words, the wretched mosquito slayer was even more astonished. It was unknown whether he was frightened by the danger revealed in these words, or shocked by the fact that the black mosquito magical beast had finally broken free from the enslavement of the mental restriction and advanced to the late stage of the black hole realm. In short, it was completely dumbfounded for a moment. At the same time, Yi Xian, who was lurking at the end of the tunnel above, was also completely shocked. At this moment, Yi Xian's entire head was rumbling, and his face was full of sluggishness. The words of the black mosquito beast were like steel needles that pierced into his heart, causing him to feel an incomparable throbbing pain. He was unwilling. From the other party's words, Yi Xian could clearly tell that if there were no accidents, the level 9 slave seal that had been inserted into the black mosquito's body could have completely subdued and controlled the black mosquito. The spirit restriction left by the great demon commander could make the black mosquito submit at a critical moment, when Naibwa Mountain activated the mother seal. Also, the black mosquito had just said that the level 9 slave seal that had been inserted into its body was more powerful than the spirit mark left in its brain by the great demon commander. Since that was the case, it was obviously possible to completely enslave the black mosquito through this level 9 slave seal, unlike the spirit restriction left by the great demon commander, which was just a threat. Yi Xian's deduction was correct. A level 8 slave seal could deal with black hole state experts who were in the 8th level of the star state. Even for a late black hole realm expert, a rank 9 slave seal was more than enough. Unfortunately, Yi Xian had calculated everything and was extremely cautious. But in the end, he still missed one thing, and that was the mental restriction that the great commander of the demon tribe left in the brain of the black mosquito demon beast. Even though the spiritual restriction wasn't as powerful as Yi Xian's level 9 slave seal, it still had the same effect. It was to control the black mosquito beast's brain and eventually control it. Two forces with the same goal but with different masters appeared in the brain of the black mosquito beast at the same time. Naturally, they began to fight each other at once, wearing each other down. In the end, the black mosquito beast was the one who benefited. After all, regardless of whether it was Yi Xian's 9th level slave seal or the mental restriction left behind by the great commander of the demon tribe, they were all condensed from the purest source of spiritual energy. Of course, they were unbreakable when they were complete, but as they wore each other down, they turned into the purest source of spirit energy, which eventually merged with the black mosquito's brain. The black mosquito beast took the opportunity to absorb the energy and break through the bottleneck. Everything was so coincidental that the truth couldn't have been realized if any of the factors had been missing. However, it was too late to say anything now. Just as these thoughts quickly flashed through Yi Xian's mind and he understood everything in a short period of time, the black mosquito mother beast, who was giggling on the soft bed in the mosquito nest below, proudly said its thanks as it raised its head to look in the direction Yi Xian was standing. At this moment, Yi Xian clearly had the illusion that he and the mosquito beast were looking at each other. His body shook, and he even suspected that there was a problem with his perfect oscillation skill. Perhaps it was because his mind was shaken that caused the perfect oscillation skill to pause for a very short time, which leaked his aura and was detected by the mosquito beast. Otherwise, why would the black mosquito magical beast suddenly raise its head and look in his direction instead of the other passageways that were densely packed in the nightmare wall? The probability of such a coincidence happening was simply too minuscule. Thinking of this, Yi Xian couldn't help but feel shocked again, and then quickly checked the operation of the perfect oscillation skill. However, he quickly discovered that there was no problem at all. Not a single trace of his aura leaked out. Even when his mind was shaken, the state of the perfect vibration skill did not show any signs of stagnation or even a ripple. Under such circumstances, the mosquito beast shouldn't have discovered him, but it had clearly determined his position. What was the problem? Yi Xian was burning with anxiety, and he didn't move at all, because if he couldn't find the root of the problem, it would be useless no matter how he tried to escape. The mosquito beast could detect him standing here, but if he escaped somewhere else, would the mosquito beast not be able to detect him? He was simply deceiving himself. You're not bad at all. Knowing that I've already discovered you, you can actually resist running away? TSK, TSK, TSK. I'm starting to admire you more and more. Just as Yi Xian's mind was racing as he quickly analyzed the source of the problem, the black mosquito mother beast once again laughed. I have to say, you little guy are really mysterious. Not only are you able to possess a mental imprint that is even stronger than the mental restriction of the great commander of the demon cultivator tribe, which has the effect of enslaving a mental imprint, you even have this kind of terrifying concealment ability that even a black hole realm cultivator can't detect. This servant is becoming more and more interested in you. You didn't run away because you're trying to figure out where the problem is, right? It's useless. Actually, you're not leaking any aura at all, so the problem isn't with you at all. What's the point of thinking about it? Come down, no matter where you run to, as long as you're in this demon nest, I'll be able to detect you immediately. I've nothing to do, so I've already refined this demon nest. So, all of a sudden, there's a small piece of land that's about 1 meter in diameter. All of a sudden, there's nothing left. Even the black fog that pervades the entire space can't be detected. Tell me, how can I not detect it? At this point, the mother mosquito beast's smiling face suddenly darkened, and it raised its hand to grab Yi Xian from afar. His voice suddenly turned stern at this moment. Stinking brat, get down here right now. Humph. I've never heard of anyone being able to decompose a demon's brain and extract its spiritual origin energy. I really love you to death. Chapter 2679. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations The Only Chance. Upon hearing the mother mosquito beast's words, Yi Xian finally came to a realization, but he smiled bitterly in his heart. Although it was good news that there was no problem with his perfect oscillation, this result was obviously meaningless to Yi Xian. The mother mosquito beast had nothing better to do, so it had refined the entire devil's nest into a magic treasure. Under such circumstances, even if there was no problem with Yi Xian's perfect oscillation, the mother mosquito beast did not need to look for problems with him. It could just sense the abnormality of the magic treasure in the devil's nest and instantly find him. Who could have foreseen this? All of this could only be said to be fate. Perhaps it was fated to be such a disaster. Just as his body was being pulled towards the mosquito nest bed below, it wasn't that Yi Xian hadn't thought of immediately transforming the perfect vibration into an absolute vibration. This way, even if the black mosquito beast trapped him, it would not be so easy to kill Yi Xian. Absolute oscillation represented an absolute defense. Furthermore, it consumed Yi Xian's mental power. As long as Yi Xian had a trace of mental power origin, his absolute oscillation shield would not collapse. Moreover, the mental power source core in his sea of consciousness stored a lot of mental power origin. In addition, the 300 level 3 and level 4 slave seals could be decomposed at any time and turned into pure mental power origin. In that case, he could more or less hold on for a while. However, as soon as this thought flashed through Yi Xian's mind, he immediately gave up. So what if he could hold on for a while? There was no point in it at all. Could he wait for reinforcements to arrive? Or could the mother mosquito beast change its mind? What a joke! At the thought of this, Yi Xian smiled bitterly in his heart. Suddenly, a bold idea slowly emerged from the depths of his mind. After a quick deduction, his heart suddenly pounded. This plan was feasible, and if it succeeded, all of his previous mistakes would be made up for, and everything would return to how it was before. The mother mosquito beast, including the wretched mosquito slayer, would not be able to escape his control in the end. Although the consequences of failure were equally serious, and there was absolutely no chance of survival, Yi Xian had already fallen to this point. What else did he not dare to gamble on? Even if the mother mosquito beast did not want to kill him, what it wanted was the method to decompose Yi Xian's brain core and extract his mental power. How could he possibly give it? That was the power of the devouring system. Not to mention the fact that Yi Xian could not give it up. Even if he could, Yi Xian would not compromise and would rather die. That, because he'd lost the devouring system, with his current weak strength and the fact that he'd already made so many enemies as soon as he arrived, Yi Xian's final result was still to fall on the path of death. Rather than that, he would rather die with dignity. Thinking of this, Yi Xian immediately dispelled the perfect vibration and revealed himself halfway down. At the same time, he kept all of his treasures into the undying world in his body. As for the 300 level 3 and level 4 slave seals, he threw them all to the devouring system and gave the order to fuse them at full speed. The reason why he did this was partly to protect his treasures and partly to save his own life. Yi Xian believed that the enemy would not be able to detect the treasures that he kept in his undying world. Similarly, the enemy would not be able to detect the treasures that he threw to the devouring system. Even though both the devouring system and the undying world were in his body, even a black hole realm expert would not have the ability to do so. Not to mention forcefully retrieving the treasures, even sensing the existence of the undying world and the devouring system was basically impossible. In other words, the current Yi Xian's body was empty. There was nothing. Under such circumstances, although the enemy knew that something was wrong, as long as Yi Xian did not relent, the enemy would not kill him on the spot no matter how angry he was, in order to obtain the treasures and the method of dissecting the demon's brain to extract mental energy. In this way, Yi Xian would have the opportunity to use the 300 level 3 and level 4 slave seals to fuse a new level 9 slave seal. As long as the second level 9 slave seal was successfully fused, Yi Xian would have the opportunity to turn the tables. What he was fighting for now was this opportunity. This was his only chance of survival. Once he succeeded, all his previous mistakes would not matter anymore. However, if he failed, he would definitely anger the enemy when he attacked again. In order to be safe, the enemy would probably give up on obtaining the treasures and the method of dissecting the demon's brain to extract mental energy from it and kill him in one fell swoop. After all, the spiritual seal left by the great commander of the demon tribe in the demon's brain had been removed. Moreover, the enemy's cultivation had indeed profited from this misfortune and entered the advanced black hole realm. The black mosquito beast was dispensable to Yi Xian's method of dissecting the demon's brain to extract mental energy from it. Obtaining it would at most be the icing on the cake. Even if it did not obtain it, there would not be any serious consequences. Could rush to the 4th level at any time, kill Mount Naibua, seize the Black Mosquito Bastion, and escape, of course, with the enemy's terrifying strength as an advanced black hole realm expert. It could actually search Yi Xian's soul. Once the soul was searched, all the secrets could not be hidden and the enemy would know everything. However, if it fell into the hands of a human powerhouse, Yi Xian might be worried about this problem. However, if it was a demon or a beast, Yi Xian did not care at all. This was because there was no such thing as a soul search on the demon's side. Demons did not have a primordial spirit, so how could one search their soul? They didn't have this awareness at all. Yi Xian had long since understood this point. After all, he was worried that he might encounter a high-level devil cultivator. Once the other party was able to search his soul, then he wouldn't be able to keep any secrets. In fact, even if Yi Xian fell into the hands of a human powerhouse, he would not have to worry about this problem. This was because he already had a spiritual source core in his knowledge sea that was unique to demons. Demon scouts moved around the meteorite star core. The reason why human powerhouses could not find any clues about them was because their spiritual source core was so strong that it could block the scanning of human powerhouses. Now, Yi Xian also had the spiritual source core that was unique to demons. Therefore, even if he faced a human black hole realm powerhouse now, he would not have to worry about his soul being searched. This situation should not have existed. How could a mere core realm cultivator boast shamelessly that he was not afraid of a black hole realm powerhouse's forced soul searching? If such words were to spread, people would laugh their heads off. Chapter 2680. I'll be the big one and you'll be the small one. This young man is quite handsome. I wonder how good his skills in bed are. When Yi Xian took the initiative to reveal himself halfway through the fall, the eyes of the female black mosquito that had been looking up suddenly lit up, and a touch of lust burst out. It even expressed its interest in Yi Xian without hiding. This scene made the wretched mosquito slayer clench his fists at the side. His face was full of hostility and resentment, as if a jar of vinegar had been knocked over. Before Yi Xian's body landed on the ground, he felt his stomach churn, and an incomparably absurd feeling welled up in his heart. If it was in the past, he would never have thought that he would one day be judged by this mother mosquito of lust, who was neither human nor beast. More importantly, there was a fellow beside him, whose face was filled with resentment that he had stolen his favor. What the hell was this? Yi Xian's figure finally landed on the soft mosquito nest bed that was 10,000 square meters in size. Then, the damned female mosquito crawled over on all fours. Its seductive face was full of hunger, and saliva was dripping from the corner of its mouth. It was clearly a super large mosquito, and thick black fog was constantly gushing out of its body. Yi Xian had previously heard from the wretched mosquito butcher that when the female mosquito was in love, it would emit a black mist of courtship. Now, it seemed that after this damned female mosquito saw him, it was actually a little difficult to control its emotions. She wouldn't press him down on the spot, and then without a second word, she would start with OXX, right? As this thought flashed through his mind, Yi Xian felt a surge of disgust. He was prepared to self-destruct. Instead of being humiliated by a female mosquito, he would rather self-destruct and explode into a pile of mush. Dear, this kid is very clever. You can't be too careless. It's best if you don't go near him. I'll protect you. Seeing the black fog gushing out of the female mosquito's body and a large amount of it at once, the wretched mosquito slayer's face was full of grief and indignation. He looked like he was very hurt and immediately came forward, showing the look and posture of a loyal protector. You're just a small satellite state cultivator. Do I need you to protect me? Don't think that I don't know what you're thinking. Get lost. The female black mosquito's face immediately darkened, and she sternly scolded. You did make me very happy, better than all the others. However, it's not like I didn't give you any benefits. Otherwise, how could you enter the satellite state in just 3 years? You're a demon. You. Calm, if you think that I have to give up the entire forest because of you, I don't mind killing you with my own hands. After saying this, the mother mosquito turned its head to look at Yi Xian. The saliva at the corner of its mouth couldn't help but drip down. It swallowed a mouthful of saliva before continuing. At the very least, with this little fresh meat, you damned old man really don't have much value anymore. If you don't know what's good for you, humph. Eft. The wretched mosquito slayer was so angry that he almost vomited blood, but he forced himself to hold it in. He glared at Yi Xian with hatred, as if he wanted to eat him alive. Yi Xian was already numb to it, so he ignored it. At this moment, the female black mosquito raised its right hand and placed it on Yi Xian's forehead. This move almost made Yi Xian self-destruct, but fortunately, he managed to control himself. The female black mosquito's right hand that was placed on his forehead looked no different from a human's right hand. It was obvious that the female black mosquito was evolving into a demon, but even though it had reached the black hole state, its torso was still that of a mosquito. You don't have any treasures? When the female black mosquito's right hand touched his forehead, Yi Xian immediately felt a wave of mental energy enter his body. It quickly circulated around his body before it was withdrawn. At this moment, the voice of the mother black mosquito beast sounded out once again, and it revealed a sense of relief. I was originally worried that you still had that mysterious spiritual brand in your hands, but now it seems you don't only have one, but you didn't bring it with you at all. Since that's the case, I have nothing to worry about. When he heard this, Yi Xian's heart skipped a beat, but he was also completely relieved. The female black mosquito was a supreme being in the black hole state, so it would never have expected that a mere starcore state ant would have an ability or secret technique that could block its probing. Therefore, the mother black mosquito beast only probed once before it ended, and it withdrew its mental power. In fact, it would have been useless even if it probed a few more times. Even Yi Xian's primordial spirit had entered the undying world, so the female black mosquito could only probe a monster core in his sea of consciousness. Alright, you watch over him for me. It's best if you can persuade him so that he'll obey me. If you can do that, humph, seeing that you're still useful, I'll let you be the boss and him be the concubine. It's not impossible. After confirming that Yi Xian no longer had the slave imprint on him, the female black mosquito was obviously completely relieved. It turned to the wretched mosquito slayer and said, I've just broken through to black hole rank 7, so I need to stabilize my realm. It'll take a few days, so you better put in more effort. Once you're done, I'll wake up and have some fun with you guys. Then I'll go kill Mount Naibua. When that time comes, you can be the captain of this black mosquito ship. With that, the female black mosquito went to the side. The bed of mosquito nests below rolled and quickly swallowed it up. Then it went down to stabilize its realm. After the female black mosquito disappeared, the wretched mosquito slayer's expression was still uncertain. He had been standing at the side thinking about something. However, the resentment toward Yi Xian on his face was obviously fading away. It was obvious that the female black mosquito's last words had worked. The female black mosquito knew him very well and knew that he would be moved. Otherwise, it would not have left Yi Xian here. What if he was killed by the wretched mosquito slayer? In fact, even though the female black mosquito knew what was going on, it was still not at ease, so it extended a wisp of mental power to investigate. At the very least, Yi Xian vaguely sensed it. It was unknown whether the wretched mosquito slayer sensed it, but after hesitating for a while, it finally slowly moved toward Yi Xian. It touched its nose embarrassedly, then awkwardly said to Yi Xian, Ahem, Brother Yi. My dear is actually a good person. It's rare for him to favor you, so why don't you just accept it? Think about it. Previously, you were just a demon pariah in the slums below. If you were to obey my dear, then when I become the captain of the Black Mosquito and give you a position as my deputy, your life would be. Chapter 2681. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation, the second level, 9 Slave Seal, Swish. After confirming that the Black Mosquito Queen's mental power had retreated and was no longer paying attention to him, the wretched mosquito slayer was right in front of him. He was not wary of Yi Xian, and the latter took advantage of his unpreparedness to attack. With an almost imperceptible sound of something breaking through the air, a level 4 slave seal entered a certain part of the wretched mosquito slayer's body and instantly drilled in. "You little—" The wretched mosquito slayer was stunned, and then he flew into a rage. He had been so careless because the Black Mosquito Queen had already checked Yi Xian's body and confirmed that there was no more slave seal in his body. Who would have thought that a supreme being at the Black Hole State would make a mistake while inspecting a Starcore State ant? Besides, the Black Mosquito Beast had no reason to lie to him about this. Therefore, the wretched mosquito slayer did not expect Yi Xian to have the ability to counterattack, so he fell for the trap immediately. At this moment, as the level 4 slave seal entered his body, it took control of his monster core almost instantly. After all, a level 3 slave seal was enough to deal with the wretched mosquito slayer. However, to be safe and to avoid being discovered by the Black Mosquito Queen for too long, Yi Xian directly used a level 4 slave seal. The effect was obvious. The wretched mosquito slayer only uttered 2 words in his rage, and then he fell silent. His eyes were filled with confusion at first, but then they gradually became clear. In just 30 seconds, the wretched mosquito slayer stood respectfully beside Yi Xian, as if he was a completely different person. He did not say a word, as if he was waiting for orders. This is how it should be after being controlled. Yi Xian secretly heaved a sigh of relief. As he carefully paid attention to the spiritual energy fluctuations in his surroundings, he instructed in a low voice. "For the time being, you don't have to treat me as your master. How are you usually? How are you now? I don't think I need to teach you this. This order will be effective until my next order appears." Just as Yi Xian finished speaking, the wretched mosquito slayer turned around and walked to the side, falling asleep. It seemed that after this fellow was troubled by the Black Mosquito Mother Beast, he would most likely fall asleep. However, this was good. Yi Xian could calm down and focus on condensing a new level 9 slave seal. Previously, he had used 200 level 3 slave seals to condense 100 level 4 slave seals. Now, he was going to use these 100 level 4 slave marks. Of course, he had used one of them on the Whist Mosquito Slayer, so he was only left with 99 level 4 slave marks. But that was enough. 2 or 4 marks to make a level 5. 2 level 5 marks to make a level 6. And so on and so forth. Only 32 level 4 slave seals were needed to form a level 9 slave seal. After success, Yi Xian would have 67 of these level 4 slave seals left. However, although it was easy to say, this process required a certain amount of time. Fortunately, the Black Mosquito Queen needed a few days to consolidate its realm. However, Yi Xian did not need such a long time to condense a level 9 slave seal using 32 level 4 slave seals. Could be done in about 2 days. The entire process went smoothly. 2 days later, Yi Xian had another level 9 slave seal in his hands. His originally worried heart was finally completely at ease. At this point, the Black Mosquito Queen still had not come out of seclusion. It would probably take about 2 more days. At this time, if Yi Xian had asked the Whist Mosquito Slayer to take him away, the 2 of them would most likely be able to escape. However, that was obviously impossible. In order to be safe, Yi Xian decided to condense another level 9 slave seal. As for the one he condensed before, he secretly gave it to the wretched mosquito butcher and gave it to him in such a manner. The reason for this was to create a double insurance. Anyway, he would still need another level 9 slave seal to deal with that guy at Mount Naibua. What he was doing now was not useless. Of the remaining 67 level 4 slave seals, 32 were taken out by Yi Xian. There were 35 remaining, and there were still 200 level 3 slave seals. In the next 2 days, Yi Xian successfully condensed the 3rd level 9 slave seal. He kept this one with him. After doing all this, he stopped condensing all the other slave seals. This was because it was enough. After all, it was a loss to condense all the other slave seals. He felt a little heartache. Thus, he kept all the other slave seals in his undying world. He only left one level 9 slave seal in the spirit source core in his mind. Now all he had to do was wait. While waiting, Yi Xian was burning with anxiety. Calculating the time, he had already been in the demon's nest for 4 days, and half of the 8 days had already passed. If he didn't hurry up, then Mount Naibua would discover the abnormality on the second floor. At that time, the 2,000-man demon slave armies that Yi Xian had subdued would all be annihilated, and that guy from Mount Naibua would also become vigilant because of this. Even if the Black Mosquito Queen appeared now and was subdued, the remaining time would be very tight. After all, they still had to deal with the large number of demon elites on the third floor. Even with the help of the subdued Black Mosquito Queen, the demon elites in the machinery area were very alert. Once they made a move, any one of them could immediately warn them. Therefore, this segment actually required time to think of a way to deal with it. Calculating in this way, only 4 days was really a tight schedule. What's more, the Black Mosquito magical beast hadn't appeared yet. If it delayed for another 2 days, it would really be a big mess. With this thought in mind, Yi Xian was so anxious that he almost wanted to send the wretched mosquito slayer to the Black Mosquito Queen's seclusion area to hurry it up. However, that was obviously impossible. If he really did that, he was afraid that the other party would immediately become suspicious. When that time came, everything would really be over. These thoughts flashed through Yi Xian's mind. He was burning with anxiety, but he did not have the slightest idea. He could only accept his fate and wait patiently. Fortunately, the Black Mosquito Queen did not disappoint him too much. Although it had taken half a day for the Black Mosquito Queen to come out of seclusion, it was only half a day. For Yi Xian, it was basically acceptable. At this moment, with the Black Mosquito Queen coming out of seclusion, for Yi Xian, the urgency of time and so on were almost immediately thrown to the back of his mind. Right now, the most important thing was to attack and subdue the Black Mosquito Mother Beast. If this could not be done, everything else would be for naught, and there would be no meaning to it. How is it? Did he agree? Just as Yi Xian's heart was tightening, the Black Mosquito Queen had slowly walked over. Chapter 2682. Translator, Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations returned to the third level. The mosquito slayer's face fell when he heard the mother mosquito's question. He stood to one side, embarrassed. It was obvious what he meant. Trash. The mother mosquito's expression darkened. It turned to glare at the wretched mosquito slayer, then turned its attention back to Yi Xian. Obviously, it did not see anything unusual about the wretched mosquito slayer. On the one hand, it was because he was following Yi Xian's orders and was behaving as usual. Even if there were some differences, they were very weak. On the other hand, the mother mosquito's attention was completely focused on Yi Xian. Before it went into seclusion, it had said that it would have a threesome with Yi Xian and the wretched mosquito slayer after it came out. Once it was done, it would deal with the leader of the Black Mosquito Bastion, Nabashan. Given the mother mosquito's lustful nature, it had probably thought about this many times during its seclusion. Now that it was out, it was naturally thinking about this matter. How could it have the energy to pay attention to the wretched mosquito slayer's actions? On the other hand, the latter just shrugged his shoulders and didn't say much at all. This also prevented him from speaking too much and making a mistake. In short, at least for now, the wretched mosquito slayer had successfully fooled the mother mosquito. Now all Yi Xian needed to do was cover for him. Indeed, from the beginning, Yi Xian had never thought that he would be the main force in subduing the mother mosquito. After all, the mother mosquito was a supreme being in the black hole realm. Even though it had checked Yi Xian's body and confirmed that there was nothing in it, Yi Xian's previous performance was very unusual. Whether it was the perfect oscillation or the 9th level slave seal, they were not things that a core realm ant should be capable of. From this point of view, it was not completely unacceptable that he had the means to fool a supreme being in the black hole realm. If Yi Xian could think of this, how could the black hole realm mother mosquito not think of it? In other words, although the mother mosquito appeared to be carefree on the surface, it was likely that she had always been on guard against him. In this sort of situation, if Yi Xian were to place all his hopes on himself, then he would truly be courting death. The mother mosquito was approaching him with an unfriendly expression. From the looks of it, if she was not going to kill him, then she was going to use some kind of force to get rid of him. With a chill, Yi Xian thought art of course he did not hesitate. He sent a dozen psychic wind blades of wind at once. Of course, one of these wind blades of course contained a 9th level slave seal. However, on the surface, Yi Xian still pretended to be unafraid of death and would rather die than submit. Even though he knew that the other party could see through him with a single glance, this kind of disguise was actually part of his plan. He had deliberately followed the other party's guesses and did all this. Humph, you're quite good at acting. You look like you'd rather die than submit to me. It's as if you're desperate. You know that these low-level psychic wind blades are useless against me, but you still want to fight to the death. Sure enough, the mother mosquito sneered when it saw Yi Xian thought art of war. Its face was full of disdain as it mocked. You're just an ant in the core realm. How dare you play such a trick on me, a supreme being in the black hole realm. You really don't know what's good for you. Let me guess, which wind blade is your spiritual imprint in? This one? No? Then this one? Huh? No. If that's the case, it must be this one. As the black mosquito mother beast spoke, it pointed its right hand into the distance from time to time. Each time it pointed, a spiritual wind blade would crumble halfway through. However, after trying a few times, it did not find anything. I don't believe that you're not playing any tricks. Humph, it must be this one. With a cold snort, the black mosquito mother beast raised its hand and pointed again. This time, the spirit wind blade that was slightly behind was dispersed by its finger. Then, a wisp of purplish-black spirit imprint was revealed. It did not disperse with the collapse of the spirit wind blade surrounding it. After all, it was a level 9 slave imprint. It would not disperse so easily. Ha ha ha. Sure enough, it seems that everything is as I have guessed. Kid, you really do have a big secret on you. Even my investigation was deceived. This time, the mother mosquito finally found evidence to prove its conjecture. It immediately laughed with a smug look on its face. It was also at this moment that the wretched mosquito slayer, who had been standing behind him less than a meter away, suddenly raised his hand and silently slapped the female mosquito's back. His cultivation was only at the satellite state, so naturally, he could not hurt a supreme being in the black hole dimension. However, as the wretched mosquito butcher slapped down with his palm, the level 9 slave seal that Yi Xian handed over to him instantly entered the body of the black mosquito mother beast. Moreover, it immediately surged towards the magic core in its brain. You? The mother mosquito trembled violently, and its eyes widened in disbelief. It spat out a word and seemed to want to turn around and look at the wretched mosquito slayer. However, it did not have the chance to do so. Just as his body was halfway through turning, a thick sense of confusion appeared in his eyes. Obviously, the level 9 slave imprint had invaded the demon core in its brain and was rapidly eroding and controlling its consciousness. In an instant, the mother mosquito stood there in a daze. It was like a robot that had run out of electricity, and it did not move at all. Phew! I finally did it. I'll be able to return to the 3rd level soon. There's still time. Seeing this, Yi Xian's heart, which had been in his throat, finally fell back into his chest. As he muttered to himself in relief, he raised his hand and retrieved the level 9 slave imprint, which was wrapped in a psychic wind blade, into his body. After checking and confirming that the slave imprint was not damaged and that its structure was as stable as before, Yi Xian grinned and turned to look at the wretched mosquito slayer, who was standing respectfully beside him. Although I really hate you, I won't kill you humanely for the time being since you've made a great contribution this time. Perform well in the future, and perhaps one day I'll make you the captain of this black mosquito bastion. It's not entirely impossible. After he finished speaking, Yi Xian waited quietly. He knew that it would take at least a few minutes for the mother mosquito to be completely controlled. Chapter 2683. Everything plundered. Time passed by slowly. Unknowingly, nearly 10 minutes had passed. During this entire process, the female black mosquito beast stood there quietly with a perplexed look in its eyes. It was as if its soul had wandered into the void. It did not feel like its consciousness still existed in this world at all. This was a normal phenomenon. Yi Xian was already familiar with it, so he felt at ease and did not feel uneasy. Similarly, the wretched mosquito slayer stood respectfully at the side. If Yi Xian did not speak, he would not take the initiative to speak. This was the same as the normal demon slave. Previously, this fellow had wanted to act but failed. Instead, the more it acted, the more it did not seem like it. In the end, it finally aroused Yi Xian's suspicion. Thinking about it now, it really made one sigh. As for Yi Xian, he waited quietly at the side. He knew that there would not be any more accidents this time, so he was not anxious. Master, Black Mosquito Beast greets you. Just as Yi Xian was taking advantage of this opportunity to think about how everything would unfold after returning to the third floor, a delicate yet slightly timid voice finally sounded from behind him. From the voice, it was clearly the female Black Mosquito Beast, but the feeling was completely different. If the female Black Mosquito Beast was described as a shrewish woman before, then now its voice sounded like a shy girl next door. It was so pure that it was refreshing. Female Mosquito Beast? Refreshing girl next door? As these two completely different images appeared in his mind, Yi Xian shuddered. His entire body felt unwell. He had a feeling that there was something wrong with his mind recently. Otherwise, why would he be so suspicious of his own mind? With this suspicion, Yi Xian turned around and coincidentally met the gaze of the female Black Mosquito Beast. What shocked Yi Xian was that the female Black Mosquito Beast actually blushed at first sight and lowered its head shyly. However, its eyes were filled with joy. This kind of behavior was clearly the feeling of a young girl who was yearning for love, and her sweetheart looked at each other, and then hurriedly nodded her head. This time, Yi Xian felt really bad. He even suspected that this female mosquito was faking it like the wretched mosquito slayer from before. It was said that birds of a feather flock together. These two fellows were originally jackals of the same tribe. If the wretched mosquito butcher could do it, why couldn't the female mosquito butcher do it? However, as soon as this idea popped into his head, Yi Xian immediately rejected it. Because that was impossible no matter what. The wretched mosquito slayer had done that because he had some ulterior motives. However, this female mosquito really didn't exist anymore. Even if it had ulterior motives, it could have used a more direct method. For an existence with a supreme cultivation base at the Black Hole Realm, was there a need to do this? Of course, more importantly, Yi Xian had confidence in the Grade 9 slave seal. Previously, he had failed on the wretched mosquito butcher because he didn't understand the attribute of the slave seal. However, now that he understood, he definitely wouldn't make the same mistake again. Thinking of this, Yi Xian immediately made up his mind. He coldly glanced at the female black mosquito and said, "From now on, you have to follow me out of this demon nest. Black Mosquito is your real name, so I can't change it arbitrarily. You can call yourself Black Mosquito in private, but it's not very convenient in front of others. There's a risk of your identity being exposed, so in front of others you'll be called Li Mosquito. Also, you have to conceal your cultivation base. Just like the mosquito butcher, you'll be in the satellite state. Of course, the most important thing is your appearance. You haven't fully transformed, but fortunately, your head and limbs are no different from a demon's. The only thing missing is your main body. This is easy to solve. Just put on some clothes and cover yourself up. This way, no one will be able to see your body. The only problem is the mosquito wings on your back. Can you put them away?" "Yes, master. These are all small problems. Li Mosquito can solve them with a wave of my hand." Hearing Yi Xian's words, the black mosquito mother beast nodded with a very obedient expression. Immediately after, she didn't take out her clothes or anything like that. With just a wave of her hand, the originally naked mosquito beast's black body was bound by a light purple tight suit. From the outside, it looked like a human or demon woman with a fiery figure and a seductive appearance. Even the pair of black mosquito wings on her back were absorbed into her body. At the same time, her cultivation base was concealed to the satellite state according to Yi Xian's instructions. However, she was a level 9 satellite state, which was much more powerful than the wretched mosquito butcher who was a level 4 satellite state. In this way, Yi Xian, the wretched mosquito butcher, and the female black mosquito, no, she should be called Li Mosquito now. When the three of them stood together, it was impossible to tell that there was a black hole state female black mosquito among them. They were all demons. The only strange thing was that the wretched Mosquito Butcher and Li Mosquito, who were both satellite states, were extremely respectful to Yi Xian, who was only a core state. It was unbelievable. Very good. Yi Xian was extremely satisfied with Li Mosquito's actions. As a result, he could boldly bring it out with him. With the help of this level 7 black hole state female black mosquito, it would be much easier for him to sweep through the 3rd level. At this thought, Yi Xian couldn't help but soften his tone. He looked at Li Mosquito and said, "We're about to leave this place. Our target is the 3rd level of the Black Mosquito Bastion. If there are no accidents, I'm afraid we won't be back for a while. If you have any treasures in this demon nest, it's best if you take them out now and take them with you." Yi Xian asked because he was a little curious. His opponent was a black hole state supreme being, so surely she would have some treasures that would surprise him. Now that he was the master, if there was anything he wanted, Yi Xian wouldn't be polite and would take it away immediately. However, what surprised him was that after hearing Yi Xian's words, the black mosquito mother beast shook her head without the slightest hesitation. "Master, Li Mosquito Mother Beast doesn't even have an ordinary star core origin, let alone other treasures. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been unable to break through all these years. When she was captured, all the cultivation resources were taken away." Yi Xian was very surprised by this, but after a moment's thought, he understood. If that wasn't the case, the female black mosquito wouldn't have been so bored as to refine the entire demon nest into its own treasure. She had neither cultivation resources nor treasures that could be used to nourish her body. Only someone who was extremely bored would do such a thing. In a way, it was the commander of the demon tribe who had taken away its treasures that had almost caused Yi Xian to fail. Chapter 2684. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. There was no time to lose. Yi Xian still had 200 rank 3 slave seals, 35 rank 4 slave seals, and 1 rank 9 slave seal. A rank 9 slave seal was meant to deal with Naboshan, a black hole realm elite. But they couldn't kill all of the demonkin elites below Mount Naibwa. Just the 3rd floor alone required at least 200 demonkin elites to keep the Black Mosquito Bastion running. If they couldn't kill them all, then it would be pointless to try to steal a bastion that couldn't function. The 200 rank 3 slave seals he had were meant for these 200 elite demons to keep the Black Mosquito Bastion running. Rank 3 slave seals could control demons at the satellite realm. 200 satellite realm elites were more than enough to keep the 3rd level engine room running. In that case, there were only 35 4th rank slave seals left. Since Naboshan couldn't be killed right away, there was still a leader above him who commanded 10 demonkin bastions. Naboshan was one of his subordinates. If Naboshan died, the Black Mosquito would be in great danger before it could leave the domain of the falling stars. Since that was the case, Naboshan should have some guards around him, right? These 35 rank 4 slave seals were meant for this group of guards to keep up appearances. A rank 4 slave seal could control demons at the planet realm of the 4th realm. It was considered strong. 35 planet realm elites were enough to keep up appearances in certain situations. Of course, there would be other demons in the Black Mosquito Bastion whose strength was between the planet realm and the black hole realm. Although there weren't many of them, they definitely existed. However, Yi Xian didn't plan to keep them around. If he encountered any, he would kill them all. After all, the Black Mosquito Bastion was important, but to Yi Xian it was an external object. To him, the most important thing was his own cultivation. The higher the realm of an elite demon, the stronger and purer the spiritual origin power contained in its brain core. Obtaining a high-level demon's brain core was extremely important to Yi Xian's cultivation. Although the special spiritual origin core in his brain didn't seem to have much to do with the human cultivation system, Yi Xian believed that once he reached a certain level, the two would have something in common. When that time came, Yi Xian's cultivation would experience a qualitative leap because of the demon's brain core in his brain. In fact, this effect was already manifested. Although he was only at the core realm level 8 because of the existence of the spiritual origin core in his sea of knowledge, he could easily kill a core realm level 9 being. After all, he was a freak who combined the consciousness and spiritual power of both human and demon cultivators. He couldn't be measured by common sense. Before stepping out of the portal leading to the demon nests, Yi Xian had already issued orders to Li Mosquito and the wretched Mosquito Slayer. In short, 200 satellite realm demon elites were to be left behind. 35 planet realm demon elites were to be left behind. Once this number was reached, the rest were to be killed and their brains dissected for their cores. As for the corpses, they were to be left for Yi Xian to use the demonic Bloodstar Essence Sword to absorb their flesh and blood essence. This had always been done this way. When Barker led the demon slaves to guard the central hall on the second floor, the corpses of the demon scouts were all piled up together for Yi Xian to use the demonic Bloodstar Essence Sword to absorb their flesh and blood essence. It was also because of this reason that after absorbing a large amount of demon flesh and blood essence, the demonic Bloodstar Essence Sword, which had completed its fourth fusion, had become more and more bloody and murderous. What Yi Xian didn't expect was that when he led the wretched Mosquito Slayer and Li Mosquito out of the portal on the left that led to the demon nests, he turned around and saw a figure who had just walked out of the portal in the middle. The portal in the middle led to the fourth floor above. This guy's cultivation wasn't weak. He was actually a star-grade powerhouse at the 5th level. At this moment, he had just stepped out of the portal in the middle when he sensed the movement beside him and subconsciously turned around to look. Then, his expression changed and he immediately exclaimed, "Mosquito Slayer? These two are... That woman is Black Mosquito. How dare you?" His expression changed drastically as he turned around and retreated to the portal behind him. However, the moment he stepped out, the black light film in the portal in the middle dissipated. If he wanted to use it now, he had to reactivate it. This delay also allowed Li Mosquito, who was behind Yi Xian, to appear behind this person in a flash. She raised her hand and the demon quietly fell to the ground. His head was cut open, and a black demon core fell into Li Mosquito's hand, which she handed to Yi Xian. A star-grade powerhouse at the 5th level was gone in the blink of an eye. This scene made even Yi Xian a little unable to accept it for a moment. He stood there in a daze, his heart beating wildly. It wasn't until now that he deeply realized how lucky he was to be able to subdue Black Mosquito Slayer. After receiving the level 5 demon core, Yi Xian directly threw it to the devouring system in his body. The system immediately began to decompose it and extract the essence of the demon's spiritual origin power. Then, he flipped his hand and took out the demonic Bloodstar Essence Sword and directly slashed at the elite demon on the ground. Chi! A soft sound like ripping silk was heard, and the elite demon's corpse withered visibly. In the blink of an eye, it had turned into a withered corpse. Apart from the spiritual origin power in his body, all the essence of his flesh and blood was absorbed by Yi Xian's demonic Bloodstar Essence Sword. After all, this was all the flesh and blood essence of a star-grade powerhouse at the 5th level. Yi Xian even had an illusion that the demonic Bloodstar Essence Sword in his hand seemed to be cheering, as if it had eaten to its heart's content. This person is a confidant of Naboshan. In the entire Black Mosquito Fortress, his position is equivalent to the chief steward. Generally speaking, if there are any problems in the lower 3 levels, he will come over to deal with them. At this time, the wretched Mosquito Slayer's voice was also heard. Yi Xian's body trembled, and his face immediately turned gloomy. He had a premonition that the sharp decrease in the number of demon scouts entering and leaving the Black Mosquito Fortress had attracted the attention of the higher-ups. Although this person had now appeared on the 3rd level, this was obviously just a transition. He had passed through the 3rd level, and his destination was ultimately the 2nd level below. Fortunately, he had returned in time. Otherwise, if he had been a few hours later and this person had returned from the 2nd level to the 4th level, the whole matter would have been exposed in advance. Chapter 2685. A sea of cultivation resources. After storing the corpse of his trusted aide in his undying world, Yi Xian led Li Mosquito and the wretched Mosquito Slayer to the 3rd level of the warehouse. The area was vast, but it was more enclosed than the outside. It was an independent system. 200 Demonkin elites were permanently stationed here, and there were resource warehouses, daily supplies warehouses, and energy warehouses. The storehouse was filled with the planet's core and other treasures that the 10,000 Demonkin scouts had excavated from the outside world. The storehouse was filled with cultivation resources that were distributed to the Demonkin scouts. A type of black, or that contained a mysterious energy that could be extracted and converted into psychic power. Of course, these resources were of a lower level, and Yi Xian didn't care for them. Compared to using demonkin brain cores to cultivate, they were much slower. The power supply warehouse was where the Black Mosquito Bastion's daily operations were stored. Everything was stored here, including the defensive shields, attack systems, and the like. The warehouse wasn't a place anyone could enter as they wished, and this was where the wretched mosquito slayer's usefulness came into play. It was shameless, and in the end the guards were so infuriated that they opened the door. They wanted to chase it away, but Yi Xian placed a slave seal on them. These guards were all satellite realm elites, so Yi Xian had placed a third-rank slave seal on them. After instantly subduing the guards of the warehouse area, the rest of the matter was much easier to handle. Yi Xian directly had these guys issue a summon order to all the demon storage staff in the large area. He said that someone from above had come to investigate and told them to gather at the entrance of the warehouse area. As such, aside from a few important warehouse workers in the resource warehouse who couldn't leave, almost all of the other devilish warehouse workers had arrived. Once all 200 of them had gathered, Yi Xian ordered Li Mosquito, who was hiding at the side, to kill them all. The Black Hole Realm expert killed more than half of them without much effort. Of the 200 demonkin guards, Yi Xian only kept 20 satellite realm experts. After all, the warehouse needed to function normally, but the demonkin's management was a little too weak. 20 satellite realm experts were more than enough to manage the warehouse. After throwing all the demon cores to the devouring system, Yi Xian immediately took out the demonic blood essence sword and absorbed the essence of the other 100 or so satellite realm demonkin elites. After drinking to his heart's content, the demonic blood essence sword became more and more cheerful. Yi Xian had a premonition that this superb offensive treasure that had undergone 4 levels of fusion was going to undergo some unknown changes. After doing all this, the 3 of them were led by several elite demonkin realm demonkin elites to the warehouse's core area. There were 2 senior planet realm demonkin guards there. They weren't allowed to leave even for a moment because the items they were looking after were too important. They were the core sources that the Black Mosquito Bastion's 10,000 demonkin scouts had handed in over the years, as well as other treasures, rare minerals, and the like. As for the entire 3rd floor's warehouse area, Yi Xian wasn't interested in the other ordinary supplies or the energy required to operate the space fortress. The only things he was interested in were the core sources, rare minerals, and treasures the demonkin had collected. He was destined to loot these 2 warehouses. The 2 high-level storekeepers at the planet realm were quickly killed by the mosquito. After Yi Xian collected the magic core and extracted the essence of its flesh and blood, he first walked into the first large warehouse that was used to store all sorts of rare minerals and star core origins. Almost in the next instant, the notifications from the devouring system rang crazily in his mind. Ding! Congratulations to the host. 1 cubic meter of 9-colored star core discovered. Grade: Star Rank Legendary Mineral. Ding! Congratulations to the host. 3-star tier crystals discovered. Grade: Star Rank Epic Mineral. Ding! Congratulations to the host. Indestructible Void Metal discovered. Grade: Star Rank Precious Mineral. Yi Xian was stunned when he heard the notifications in his mind. Generally speaking, there were 3 types of star rank treasures and minerals in the context of the stars: ordinary, supreme, and supreme. Above these 3, there were actually 3 more types. However, they were basically rare, so they were usually not mentioned under normal circumstances. They were respectively legendary, epic, and supreme treasure. The 8th grade black star core and the 9th grade 9-colored star core were only legendary rank treasures. As for Yi Xian's purple star shuttle, the devil bloodstar essence sword, and the purple phoenix glass armor, even though they had already been fused 4 times, they could only be considered to be of the highest quality. From this, it could be seen how precious epic grade ores and treasures were. There was no need to even mention the true treasure level, which was above the epic level. So far, Yi Xian had only obtained 1 incomplete precious rank treasure and 1 incomplete epic rank treasure. The incomplete precious rank treasure was the Void Dimension Fragment, and the incomplete epic rank treasure was the fragment of the Immortal Star Superbrain. Who would have thought that he would actually obtain 3 epic star tier crystals and a piece of indestructible void metal? This was a huge surprise. In comparison, the 1 cubic meter of 9-colored star core was completely ignored by Yi Xian. Of course, there were still a lot of good things in this warehouse. Most of them were star core sources and various rare minerals. Yi Xian did not hesitate and kept 60% of them into his undying world, piling them up into several small mountains. The reason why he said 60% was because the remaining 40% was not enough for him. Most of them were level 2 and level 3 planetary core sources, as well as some top-grade ores. He had to leave some for the Black Mosquito Bastion. After all, if he had to deal with Bastion Commander Ba Chai in the future, he had to give something up. With that done, Yi Xian made his way to the warehouse across from him. Unlike the previous star core origin and mineral storage, the things stored here were all magic treasures. They were either obtained by killing people in the outside world, or picked up from some planets, or obtained from some cave residences and relics. After all, tens of thousands of demon dweller scouts were active in this star field all year round. Some of the immortal caves of the predecessors on the stars basically could not escape their search. As soon as he entered the warehouse, the devouring system notification sounded out in his mind once again. It was all a good notification. Yi Xian was stunned once again. Ding! Congratulations to the host. Banners discovered. Grade: Legendary Astral Treasure. Ding! Congratulations to the host. Wormhole Warship discovered. Grade: Epic Astral Warship. Ding! Congratulations to the host. Rai-D Seal discovered. Grade: Ultimate Treasure Origin Treasure. Chapter 2686. Translator: Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios Erosion Living Area Soul Subduing Banner. As the name suggests, it is a soul-type magic treasure. It is a legendary starry sky treasure. Wormhole Ship. Generally speaking, only large star-class battleships or space fortresses can perform wormhole jumps between universe planes. A 3,000-meter-long planet-class battleship like the Federation's 3,000-meter-long planet-class battleship will definitely not be able to withstand it. A small private battleship less than 1,000 meters long is even more impossible. Wormhole Ship is a private battleship that can withstand wormhole jumps. It is said that in the entire Empire, only a group of technical elites from the machinery race under Imperial Preceptor D-Air can build this. Of course, DE of the Tianji race can build it too. Because this small private battleship can allow cultivators to perform wormhole jumps between universe planes. Both the Wan Luo Federation and the Tianji race have very strict control over it. It is basically impossible for it to be leaked. Who would have thought that they would encounter one here? As for the final Lightning Emperor seal, this seal was a natural origin treasure nurtured by the heavens and earth. It was born in a star domain shrouded in boundless lightning. It was a treasure nurtured by the boundless lightning of that star domain. It was the origin of the great Tao of lightning in the universe, and it controlled the boundless lightning in the void of the galaxy. However, with Yi Xian's current ability, it is impossible for him to refine this origin treasure. Not to mention him, even the black hole realm Li Mosquito might not be able to do it. Therefore, after Yi Xian kept it, he directly threw it into his undying world. He will only use it when his cultivation level increases. Other than these 3 legendary starry sky treasures, there are many other magic treasures. Similarly, Yi Xian collected about 60% of the magic treasures that he was interested in, which is more than 10,000 magic treasures. The remaining 40% is left in the warehouse to deal with Ba Chai in the future. In less than 2 hours, the warehouse area of the 3rd level was cleared out. Everything seemed to be going smoothly, but in fact, among the 3 areas of the 3rd level, this warehouse area is the least likely to have any accidents. Therefore, Yi Xian did not relax at all. There is not much suspense in the following areas of the living area, but it is hard to guarantee that there will be no accidents in the last area, the machinery area. After leaving the warehouse area, Yi Xian immediately brought Li Mosquito and the wretched Mosquito Slayer to the living area. Coincidentally, they met 2 satellite realm demon elites outside of the living area. Yi Xian immediately used 2 grade 3 slave seals to subdue them and started interrogating them. The surprise came too quickly. It turned out that today was the day when the 200 or so demon elites in the living area would switch shifts with the 200 or so demon elites in the engine room. There were still 4 hours left. In other words, if Yi Xian was able to subdue all of the demon cultivator elites that had been resting in the living area for 3 days within 4 hours, then he would be able to effortlessly take over the engine room after 4 hours. At that time, the only thing left to do was to kill the 200 or so demon elites that had returned to the living quarters after their shift had been changed. At this point, the entire third level is swept clean. Due to the urgency of time, Yi Xian, Li Mosquito, and the wretched Mosquito Slayer immediately took action. They quickly invaded the villas and caves, and in less than 2 hours, all the 210 demon elites in the entire living area were killed. Most of them were satellite realm experts, and there were also some meteor realm demon elites. There were even planet realm demon elites, but they were all killed by Yi Xian's orders, because he did not have enough slave seals. 35 level 4 slave seals and 1 level 9 slave seal were prepared for Naboshan and his 35 personal guards. As for the remaining 200 level 3 slave seals, 25 of them were used in the warehouse. Now, there were only 175 left. Therefore, out of the 210 elite demons, they could only kill 30 or so of them. Fortunately, they explained that they only needed 130 demon elites to control the entire machinery area. The 100 or so demon elites that were usually present were actually taking shifts in the machinery area. Now, Yi Xian had more than 40 demon slaves, enough for them to take small shifts. He was not afraid that these demon slaves, who would help him in the future, would die of exhaustion. In less than 2 hours, Yi Xian had only 36 slave seals left, and the entire third-level living area was unknowingly taken over by him. Although everything looked normal on the surface, in reality, this area was already Yi Xian's world. At this point, only the 210 demon elites were left to be dealt with. Once they were all killed, only the 4th level of the Black Mosquito Bastion was left. Under Yi Xian's orders, the 175 demon slaves left the living area in batches and headed for the machinery area. Every time a batch of demonic slaves left, an equal number of demonic slaves would come out of the machinery area and enter the living area. Under these circumstances, Li Mosquito had no need to hesitate. She acted immediately and killed them all. All Yi Xian needed to do was take the Devil Cultivator's brain core from its hands, take out the Devil Bloodstar Essence Sword, and absorb all the flesh and blood essence from the corpses of the Devil Cultivator elites. Then, with a wave of his hand, he stored the remaining withered corpses into the undying world within his body. Time passed slowly. Before they knew it, another 2 hours had passed. As batch after batch of demon slaves entered the engine room, they were exchanged for batch after batch of demon elites. Until now, after more than 10 times in a row, the entire engine room had undergone a huge change. All of the demon elites inside had come out, and the ones controlling the engine room were all Yi Xian's demon slaves. As for the devil elite that came out of the building, other than the 2 planet realm managers who were subdued by Yi Xian using 2 level 4 slave seals, the rest were all killed. At this point, the entire third level had been swept clean. In addition to a large amount of cultivation resources and treasures, Yi Xian had also obtained several hundred demon brain cores. He had fed them to the devouring system so that it could rapidly decompose them and extract the pure spiritual energy contained within. In addition, his demon blood star essence had also absorbed a large amount of demon blood essence. Its bloodthirsty and nimble feeling had grown stronger. Yi Xian even had an illusion that this supreme-grade offensive magic treasure was about to give birth to a sword spirit. If that was the case, its quality would instantly increase from the supreme grade to a legendary grade offensive magic treasure. But right now, Yi Xian didn't have the mood to pay too much attention to this, because to him, there was still a more important and final link that needed to be completed. That was to sweep through the 4th level and subdue Mount Naibua, the chief and deputy chief manager of the 3rd floor's engine room that he had left behind and used 2 level 4 slave seals to subdue were the preparations he had to make to achieve this last step. Chapter 2687. Translator, Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations entering the 4th level in the entire 3rd level. The only people who could activate the portal in the middle of the small square and enter the 4th level were the 2 planet-grade managers of the machinery area. They were called Two-Wei and Delay. Thanks to Two-Wei and Delay, Yi Xian quickly understood the situation on the 4th level of the Black Mosquito Bastion. The 4th level of the Black Mosquito Bastion was the most powerful force in the entire Black Mosquito Bastion. There were only 181 demons, including the leader, Naboshin. The core of these 181 demons was Naboshin, his 50 elite guards, his 5 trusted advisors, and his 5 trusted stewards. The other 120 people were all demon slaves who served Naboshin. Among these 120 people, 60 of them were beautiful demon slave maids. The other 60 were demon slaves who served the daily life of Mount Naibwa and enjoyed luxurious daily life, including the so-called kitchen slaves who were good at making all kinds of delicious food and wine. It could be said that these 120 demonic slaves were all high-level slaves. Most of their cultivation bases were around the satellite realm. After learning about this situation, Yi Xian immediately gave orders to the wretched mosquito killer and Li Mosquito. There was no need to deal with these 120 demon slaves of Naboshin. After Naboshin was dealt with, they would definitely not dare to act rashly. After Yi Xian dealt with everything, he would refine 120 level 3 slave seals and subdue them. After all, the 4th level couldn't lack such talents. Otherwise, wouldn't they be exposed on the spot if they didn't even have high-level slave maids and high-level demon slaves when they came in contact with the other higher-ups of the space fortress? In other words, the only people they had to deal with on the 3rd level were Naboshin, his 50 guards, 5 trusted advisors, and 4 trusted butlers. This was because one of them had already been killed. There were only 60 high-level demons in total. It didn't seem like a lot, but these 60 people were extremely difficult to deal with. The 50 guards were all 4th-grade planet-grade beings. Yi Xian still had 33 level 4 slave seals, so he could deal with more than half of them. As for the remaining 17, he just had to kill them. As for Naboshin, his cultivation level was at the 4th level of the Black Hole Realm. He had just entered the middle level of the Black Hole Realm and was 3 levels lower than Li Jing. Of course, at that time, Yi Xian would use perfect oscillation to hide at the side and watch the opportunity to plant the level 9 slave seal on him. The key was the 5 trusted advisors of Mount Naibwa and the 4 trusted butlers. These 9 were all planetesimals of the 5th rank of the Starry Sky planetesimals. What's more, they were indispensable to the Black Mosquito Bastion. Even if Yi Xian didn't stay behind, at least one of his advisors and stewards had to be left behind. Otherwise, the entire Black Mosquito Bastion would be difficult to manage in the future. It just so happened that Yi Xian had underestimated the need for this and did not have a level 5 slave seal on hand. Forget it. 33 personal guards. I'll take in 3 less. I'll just keep 3. After pondering for a while, Yi Xian made a decision. This way, there will be 3 free level 4 slave seals. I just need to refine 1 more level 4 slave seal. With these 4 level 4 slave seals, I will be able to fuse 2 level 5 slave seals. It just so happens that one of the planet-grade advisors and stewards will be left behind. It will be barely enough to maintain the normal operation of the Black Mosquito Bastion. After muttering like this, Yi Xian immediately started to condense the slave seals. Fortunately, it was only condensing 1 level 4 slave seal. With Yi Xian's full effort, it was completed in a few hours. Then, he fused the 4 level 4 slave seals into 2 level 5 slave seals. At this point, he had a total of 33 slave seals in his possession. 1 level 9 slave seal, 2 level 5 slave seals, 30 level 4 slave seals. The 4th level is divided into the core area and the outer area. The 2 areas are separated by a circular corridor. The outer area is the area where the more than 100 servant attendants work. Wei Tuo continued to explain in detail. In this wide circular corridor that separates the 2 areas, there are 3 teams of Naibwa Mountain's personal guards patrolling continuously. Each team has 10 people, and the other 20 personal guards are on rotational rest. Their living place is also at the outer area of the circular corridor. It is a personal guard dormitory in the north corner. As for the inner area of the circular corridor, it is the core of the 4th level. It is divided into 2 parts. DeLay continued to explain. The part on the left is where the intelligence center of the entire Black Mosquito Bastion is located. It is a super brain. Naibwa Mountain's 5 planet-grade advisors are active in this area. The core area on the right is Naibwa Mountain's private property. Usually, other than him, there are only 5 trusted stewards there. Other than that, there are some demon elites who are summoned for questioning, or some beautiful demon attendants who serve him there. In other words, among the 60 targets that we need to deal with on the 4th level, the 50 personal guards can be dealt with immediately. Yi Xian's eyes lit up, and he immediately made arrangements. After entering, first subdue the 3 groups of patrolling personal guards in the circular corridor. Then order them to monitor the core area. We will take advantage of this darkness and enter the living place of the personal guards in the north corner. First, we will deal with the other 20 personal guards, and then enter the core area. Don't bother about the 5 advisors and the 4 stewards. If you encounter them, just leave one of them and kill the rest. After we enter the core area, what we need to do is to go straight to the root of the problem. The first thing we need to do is to attack Naibua Mountain. Two-Way, Delay, and the wretched mosquito killer are not to enter, lest they are killed by Naibua Mountain. Only Li Mosquito and I will enter the core area. At that time, Li Mosquito will be in the light, and I will be in the dark. I will try to deal with Naibua Mountain as soon as possible, and then deal with his advisors and stewards. Finally, you take the 30 subdued personal guards and gather the 120 high-level demon slaves on the 4th level. Do you all understand? After saying that, Yi Xian turned his head and glanced at the wretched mosquito killer, Li Mosquito, Two-Way, and Delay. His gaze swept across their faces. The 4 of them nodded, indicating that there was no problem. Good. In that case, let's begin the operation. Enter the 4th level. After saying that, Yi Xian took a deep breath and took a step back with Li Mosquito and the wretched mosquito killer. Two-Way was the first to step forward. After activating the space door, he stepped in. According to Yi Xian's instructions, Li Mosquito was the second to enter, followed by the wretched mosquito killer. Then, Delay activated the space door again. This time, to be safe, Yi Xian stepped in first, followed by Delay. Chapter 2688. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios. The great battle against Mount Naibua. Due to Yi Xian's meticulous planning, the 5 of them entered the 4th level and started their operation. Everything went smoothly. Of course, this was mainly due to Li Mosquito's black hole state level 7 strength. Under the suppression of the Li Mosquito, a total of 3 teams of 30-star Realm Devil Cultivator personal guards were all successfully subdued by Yi Xian by planting a level 4 slave seal on them 3 times. Then, the 5 of them rushed to the personal guards' living quarters 500 meters away. Li Mosquito acted and killed the 20 planetary state personal guards that were resting inside. Although the brains were dissected on the spot, Yi Xian didn't hand the corpses over to the demonic Bloodstar Essence Sword to absorb the essences. This was because he was worried that the demonic Bloodstar Essence Sword would evolve from a super grade to a legendary grade attack treasure. There would definitely be a commotion that would affect the entire situation. Therefore, these 20 corpses were kept in Yi Xian's undying world and left for the demonic Bloodstar Essence Sword to absorb later. It was worth mentioning that the Undying World was the new name of the Devouring Space. Because the Devouring Space was the most advanced technology of the Undying Dynasty, the Devouring Space could continuously grow to the level of an astral realm. Therefore, it had a new name, the Undying World. At the same time, this was the top secret of the Wan Luo Federation. It was related to the creation of a new universe. Although the Undying World couldn't store a living Starry Sky rank expert, Yi Xian couldn't use this move to bring Du Wenshuan out when he wanted to help him escape. However, it was still possible to collect the corpse of a dead Starry Sky rank expert. At this point, out of the 60 people that needed to be dealt with on the 4th level, 50 of them had been dealt with. The remaining ones were the 4 trusted butlers, the 5 trusted advisors, and Mount Naibua himself. A total of 10 people. As for the slave seals in Yi Xian's hands, there were only 3 remaining. 2 level 5 and 1 level 9. Next, the 5 of them split into 2 groups. The wretched mosquito killer, Two-Way, and Pulei each led a team of 10 subdued planetary state personal guards. They patrolled the circular corridor that separated the 2 regions, preventing any servants from entering the core region. Meanwhile, Yi Xian and Li Mosquito had just entered the core area of the 4th floor. According to the original plan, the 2 of them would directly enter the right side of the core area of the 4th floor, which was the private property of Mount Naibua. However, After subduing the 30 demon cultivator bodyguards, Yi Xian asked them for a bit and found out a new piece of information. It was that the Black Mosquito Star Fortress's intelligence center on the left side of the core area, which was also the superbrain of the starry sky. It had an emergency ability, which was self-detonation. This ability was controlled by 5 of Naibua's advisors. If 4 of them entered the seal, the entire bastion would self-destruct. This information shocked Yi Xian so much that he changed his plan at the last minute. Now, he and Li Mosquito were heading in the direction of the AI core hall on the left side of the core area. Li Mosquito swaggered around. As the guardian beast of the Black Mosquito Bastion, it had been here before. In the past 10 years, it had come here once every 3 or 4 years. It did indeed have the authority to enter the 4th floor. Mount Naibua had the master seal that controlled its mental imprint, so there was no need to worry about it doing anything destructive. It would be fine as long as it didn't leave the Black Mosquito Bastion. As for Yi Xian, he activated the perfect oscillation. His figure and aura completely disappeared. The 5 advisors of Mount Naibua were all level 5 planetary state powerhouses. In front of Li Mosquito, who was at the black hole state, they might not be as insignificant as the core state powerhouses, but they were still insignificant at best. It sounded awkward, but in fact it meant exactly that. To put it bluntly, they were still insignificant. However, when Li Mosquito entered the AI core hall of the Black Mosquito Bastion, the 5 of them turned their heads at the same time. When they saw that it was Li Mosquito, they were stunned for a moment. Then they laughed at the same time. Black Mosquito, didn't you just come here 3 years ago? What's wrong? That guy called Mosquito Butcher can't satisfy you anymore? You didn't kill him, did you? Ha ha ha. That's most likely the case. I thought that kid was very powerful. He used to have 1 die every month. But he actually lasted 3 years. Now it seems that he's just so. It looks like he's here to ask for a boy toy from the leader again. If this goes on, the Black Mosquito Bastion will be almost depleted by you. Black Mosquito, your appetite is growing. That place is so big. So naturally, your appetite is different from before. Ha ha ha. As the 5 of them laughed mockingly, Li Mosquito's expression darkened. She asked the air beside her, "Master, can I have one more? How dare you?" Yi Xian was furious and scolded. At the same time, he immediately attacked. A level 5 slave seal shot out and landed on the forehead of the person in the middle of the 5 Naibua Mountain think tanks. Almost at the same time, Li Mosquito sighed helplessly. "All right, for then." Boom. Boom. Before he finished speaking, for mountain-like pressure appeared and directly enveloped the other 4 people. "Kacha! Kacha! Black Mosquito, you dare to rebel? Who's the other one? You call him master? This is unacceptable." As the 4 mountain-like pressure fell, the other 4 people's leg bones were instantly broken. Their bodies fell short, and at the same time, they roared in anger. In the next moment, Li Mosquito had already arrived in front of the 4 of them. Without seeing it make a move, the 4 people's heads had already cracked open. 4 huge black prismatic crystals fell out and fell into Li Mosquito's hands. Li Mosquito handed them to the air beside her. "This will not happen again." Yi Xian coldly swept his gaze over the mosquito. He saw that it was obedient, but there was still anger in its eyes. It was obvious that it was angered just now. Although Yi Xian was also curious, it was originally such a perverted nature. Why would others be so angry when they teased it? However, Yi Xian did not think too much about it. After throwing the 4 level 5 demon cores to the devouring system, he waved his hand and kept the 4 demon think tanks' corpses into his undying world. At this time, the demon think tank in the middle had also regained clarity in his eyes. He directly knelt on the ground and called out to his master. "All right, you just stay here." After saying that, Yi Xian activated the perfect vibration again and directly urged Li Mosquito. "All right, hurry up and move. Go to the right area. There are still 5 people. Remember, you can only kill 3. 1 butler and Naibua Mountain can only be subdued. Let's move immediately. Naibua Mountain has already sensed your aura just now." After saying that, The master and servant simultaneously left the intelligence center hall on the left and quickly rushed to the right of the core area of the 4th floor. At the same time, just as the two of them rushed out of the intelligence center hall on the left, in a huge luxurious hall that belonged to Naibo Mountain's private territory on the right. Chapter 2689. Translator, Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translation Subduing Naibo Mountain Black Mosquito Bastion. In Naibo Mountain's private territory to the right of the core area of the 4th floor. This private territory also used space folding technology. Although it was only half of the core area of the 4th floor of the Black Mosquito Bastion, the internal space was several kilometers wide, far exceeding the diameter of the Black Mosquito Bastion's 1,000 meters from the outside. Basically, only Naibo Mountain and his 5 trusted stewards stayed in this area. Of course, from time to time, some of the higher-ups of the Black Mosquito Bastion were summoned by Naibo Mountain for questioning, as well as some servants who brought him good wine and food. Some beautiful demon women also came to serve him. Right now, there were 3 beautiful demon women there, serving Naibo Mountain, who was half lying on the sofa. On the other hand, his 4 planet-grade subordinates were sitting on a sofa in different directions of this large area, as if nothing had happened. They were all busy with their own matters. It was not until Naboshin muttered to himself that the 4 housekeepers all raised their heads, and displeasure appeared on their faces. As planet-grade powerhouses, they had naturally sensed the aura emitted by the Black Mosquito Mother Beast just now. It was worth mentioning that the Black Mosquito Mother Beast was also very clever. When it had used its pressure to instantly suppress and kill the 4 stewards of Naibo Mountain, the pressure it had emitted had remained at Black Hole Realm Level 6. This meant that it had benefited from the disaster because of Yi Xian and broken through to the late Black Hole Realm in one fell swoop. Although it was far stronger than Naibo Mountain, who was at Black Hole Realm level 4, it was 2 small levels higher. One was at the early stage of the intermediate stage, while the other was at the peak of the intermediate stage. However, whether it was Naibo Mountain or the 4 stewards in the same area as him, they obviously didn't take it to heart. Although the Black Mosquito Mother Beast was stronger than Naibo Mountain, it didn't dare to really make a move. At most, it would come to threaten him. This kind of thing had happened several times before, but because the wretched mosquito butcher had held on for 3 years, it felt like it had been a long time. Yes, every time the Black Mosquito Mother Beast came to show its power, it was because the demon scouts sent by Naibo Mountain to serve it were too weak and accidentally killed by it. Therefore, the Black Mosquito Mother Beast, who had not had enough fun, ran to the 4th level in a fit of anger. It emitted its aura and protested to Mount Naibo. But the latter didn't care at all. Although the Black Mosquito Mother Beast was strong, it had the child seal of the spiritual imprint planted by the tribe's great commander who had captured it. The mother seal had just been in the hands of Naboshin. If the Black Mosquito were to succeed, Mount Naibo would be able to subdue it even though it was weaker than it. However, in order to make a horse run, one naturally had to feed it grass. Naboshin understood this principle. Therefore, she had only accidentally killed the wretched mosquito that had persisted under her for 3 years. However, she wasn't satisfied yet. So in a moment of desperation, she ran to the 4th level and threw a tantrum as usual, asking for a gigolo to quench her cravings. Naturally, such a small request should be fulfilled. Moreover, because this kind of thing had not happened for 3 years, even if he was disturbed while he was enjoying himself, Naboshin still did not get angry. Bah! It's none of your business. Continue shrugging. Hurry up! Naboshin scolded softly as he turned to greet the 4 confidants around him. Go! Didn't Song Peng go down to check on the situation? Let him bring a stronger low-level demon up from the 2nd level and quickly get rid of that coquettish female mosquito outside. What a bummer. Sigh, I thought quite highly of that wretched mosquito butcher. I didn't expect him to only persist for 3 years. The 4 confidants looked at each other. One of them stood up and muttered to himself while shaking his head and sighing. I didn't expect him to be killed in the end. I'm afraid that in the future we'll have to go back to being disturbed once a month. It's really depressing. As he spoke, the confidant butler had already walked to the entrance of this large area. He raised his hand and lifted a spiritual imprint. Soon, a light flashed, and the entrance that was originally flickering with a thick layer of black light film was cleared. The light film disappeared. However, outside the entrance, the black mosquito mother beast's sullen face appeared in front of him. This guy was stunned. Before he could say anything, Yi Xian, who had hidden his figure, raised his hand and lifted a level 5 slave seal, which instantly disappeared into his forehead. The confidant butler's eyes immediately fell into confusion, and he stood there in a daze. Li Mosquito stepped in with a black face, its eyes flashing with monstrous anger and killing intent. Although it couldn't enter through the light door just now, it heard all the words inside clearly. For some reason, since it was subdued by Yi Xian, its temperament changed completely in an instant. It was no longer evil, and once it heard someone talk about its past, it immediately looked like it was about to go berserk. As Li Mosquito entered, Yi Xian also entered this area quietly. At the same time, he prepared the remaining level 9 slave seal at the first time. When the time was right, he would shoot it immediately. Boom! 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 Of the 4 confidant butlers, the one Yi Xian wanted had been confirmed, so there was no need to keep the remaining 3 guys. In fact, after entering, Li Mosquito blasted out 4 black hole realm auras in succession, not 3. 3 of them directly shook the 3 confidant butlers until they bled from their 7 orifices and died. The last one was aimed at Naibwa Mountain. Although the latter was alert at the first moment and dodged, the 3 demon beauties who were serving him on the sofa were directly killed on the spot. Black Mosquito, are you crazy? Do you have to freak out like this? I have already sent someone to pick a strong demon for you. Look at how anxious you are. Don't tell me you want me to serve you directly? Come on. I am not a mosquito killer. Be careful or I will kill you. Seeing that 3 of his 4 trusted subordinates had died in the blink of an eye, the remaining one had clearly been hit and was currently standing at the entrance in a daze. As for the 3 demonkin beauties, they had also died in an instant and couldn't be more dead. You rogue! Damn it! Seeing Naibwa Mountain's current attire, Li Mosquito's cheeks immediately turned red in shame and anger. She gritted her teeth and looked at him coldly. She was really a delicate and cute young woman. Hearing this, Naibwa Mountain widened his eyes as if he had seen a ghost. He was stunned for a few seconds, then he stuttered in disbelief. Are you really Black Mosquito? Don't you think you are bullying me when you say the word rogue? Could it be that you've met your true love? Which male mosquito is it? Chapter 2690. Translator, Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations Black Mosquito Unify. Who is it? Nabashan was indeed a super being in the middle stage of the black hole realm. After Yi Xian activated the perfect oscillation, his entire aura was perfectly concealed, and he did not sense anything. However, when he raised his hand and shot out the level 9 slave seal, Nabashan immediately noticed it. This abnormality finally made him realize that something was wrong. Previously, he thought that the mother black mosquito was angry because it was anxious. However, now that he found that there was an accomplice, the nature of the matter was obviously different. At the same time, his expression changed abruptly. He subconsciously wanted to activate the mother seal stored in his demon core. Since the black mosquito mother beast had already attacked him, then, if he did not use this mother seal, he would not be its opponent at all. Don't waste your energy. Your restriction mother seal is ineffective because the child seal has already been refined when I broke through to the late stage of the black hole realm. Seeing Nabashan's action at a glance, the Li Mosquito also acted pretentiously. How could it have refined the restriction child seal when it broke through to the late stage of the black hole realm? It was clearly because of Yi Xian that it had broken through to the late stage of the black hole realm when the restriction child seal had automatically melted. However, at this time, its pretentiousness, coupled with the powerful pressure of a rank 7 black hole realm, was really effective. What? You broke through to the late stage? Nabashan's face immediately turned ashen. Not only did he not activate the restriction mother seal in his demon core, but he even ignored the level 9 slave seal on Yi Xian's side. After all, no matter how great the threat from Yi Xian was, how could it be compared to a supreme being in the late stage of the black hole realm? Therefore, at this moment, when Nabashan's mind was shaken, The inconspicuous level 9 slave seal landed directly on the back of his head and entered in an instant. Everything was settled now. An hour later, Two-Way, Ballet, and wretched mosquito killer had brought all 110 demonkin slaves to Mount Naibua's private territory. At this time, in this huge area, Yi Xian was sitting cross-legged on a sofa alone with his eyes closed. There were 3 people standing behind him. One was Li Mosquito, one was Naboshan, and the last was Naboshan's trusted butler. Now, the 3 of them were standing behind Yi Xian. They were clearly acting like servants. Only Li Mosquito was a little more confident. Naboshan and his trusted butler were a little anxious. When this scene entered into the eyes of the 100-plus servants on the 4th floor that were herded in like sheep, they were terrified to the point they immediately knelt on the ground while their bodies trembled violently without end. Among them, there were close to 60 peerless demon beauties. When one looked at them all of a sudden, that scene was truly indescribable. It was also at this time that the only one left alive, the think tank of Mount Naibua, also arrived. He lowered his eyebrows and stood behind Yi Xian's sofa without saying a word. Time passed slowly. Before they knew it, a whole day had gone by. During this entire day, the demon elites in the entire space quietly waited. Not a single one of them went to disturb Yi Xian, and no one had the guts to do so. Right now, the entire Black Mosquito Bastion was under Yi Xian's control. Other than the 100 or so devil cultivator jailers at the bottom and the 100 or so high-level devil cultivator servants on the 4th floor, the other devil cultivator experts had all become Yi Xian's devil slaves. There were more than 2,000 of them, nearly 3,000 of them. As for the rest, they'd all turned into magic cores. After being decomposed by Yi Xian's devouring system, they'd extracted the pure spiritual source energy. Either they'd already been absorbed by him, or they were still in the devouring system, waiting for him to absorb them. At this time, Yi Xian was doing everything in his power to refine the slave seals. The 100 or so high-ranking demonkin servants on the 4th floor were all talents. Whether it was the food, the fine wine, or the reception of VIPs, they were all at a professional level. Most importantly, they were doing this kind of low-level work. Their cultivation was not low either. The 100 or so demonkin servants were all at the satellite realm or even the planet realm. They were the 3rd and 4th realms. Even Yi Xian would have to flee if he encountered them outside. But here, they were willing to serve the higher-ups and VIPs. Such talents were hard to find even if one held a lantern. Since Yi Xian was plotting to take over the entire Black Mosquito Bastion and might not leave alone for a short time, he would try his best to delay the demonkin in the 10 bastions stationed in the graveyard domain. He would look for an opportunity to leave the 3rd universe. Therefore, it was inevitable that the higher-ups of the 10 bastions would interact with each other. Therefore, he couldn't kill these high-ranking demonkin servants who could hold the fort. He could only subdue them. Otherwise, if the Black Mosquito Bastion didn't have the right people to hold the fort on certain occasions, they would definitely be exposed. In a little more than a day, Yi Xian managed to refine the 100 or so 3rd-level and 4th-level slave seals he needed. With his current strength, he wouldn't have been able to refine them so quickly. This time, it was because he knew the Black Mosquito Bastion had fallen into his hands that he had risked his life in excitement. After the 100 or so slave seals were used up, all the high-ranking demonkin servants present were enslaved and became his own people. At this point, the entire Black Mosquito Bastion had become Yi Xian's domain. Apart from the 100 or so demonkin wardens on the 1st floor and the nearly 10,000 Wan Luo Federation experts, Yi Xian had 2,000-strong demonkin troops on the 2nd floor, all of whom were at the core realm. On the 3rd floor, he had more than 200 demonkin technical elites. Under the leadership of Two-Way and Par, they were stationed in the machinery area and the warehouse area. Their strength was basically at the 3rd level of the satellite realm. As for the 4th floor, in addition to Li Mosquito and the wretched Mosquito Slayer, he had Naboshan, who was overseeing the entire bastion, as well as the think tank Hongji and the butler Pilo. In addition, there were 30 planet realm personal guards and attendants, of course. On the surface, they were Naboshan's attendants, but in reality, they were Yi Xian's. In addition, he had 100 high-ranking servants on the 4th floor, as well as talents such as food, wine, and beautiful women. He had everything he needed. As far as Yi Xian was concerned, although he was still the leader of the entire Black Mosquito Star Fortress in name, in reality, he was already in existence at the level of an emperor. Alright, now that the Black Mosquito Bastion has been unified, it's time to take a look at the first floor of the Myriad Hells. After everything was settled, Yi Xian suddenly thought of the green-bearded old man Lu Wenshuan and the group of Demonkin Warden brothers who had supported him from the beginning. Yi Xian muttered to himself with a smile on his face.